Hello and welcome to the channel. As always, like the video, and if you enjoyed the story, leave a comment on if you would want more. This fan fiction was not created by me, but in the description there is a link to the fanfic so you can show your support to the creator and read along. Without any more delay, let's dive into the story.
So, this is what the outside of the village looks like, huh? It's amazing, muttered Naruto as he enjoyed the ride on the carriage that I hired. Of course, I wasn't going to drag two kids that weren't ninja with me on such a long journey on foot. So I simply sent a clone to find if there were any merchants heading south while waiting for Sasuke, and after paying some money along with constant persuasion, I finally made someone agree to take us. This merchant was called Rikai. He was an old fat man, probably in his 50s. His hair started to whiten, but his body and face seemed very vigorous and energetic. After talking with him for a while, I found out that he actually comes from the land of tea, which is my destination in the first place, so I was pleasantly surprised. He had a nervous-looking young man with him called Hataru that acted as his guard, and he was the reason I had to work hard to reach an agreement with him, as he kept telling Ryukai not to take me with him for some reason, which made me suspect that something was off about this guy. I could tell that from the moment I approached him, his body was always positioned in a way to protect Ryukai in case I tried to do anything, so his fighting capabilities were definitely not to be underestimated. "This is your first time outside?" Ryukai asked Naruto with a kind smile when he noticed the look of curiosity on his face. Old man, this is my first time outside," replied Naruto, innocently causing dark lines to appear on Ryukai's face, who doesn't like to be reminded of his age. "Who are you calling old man?" "I'm still young," said Ryukai, who regretted talking to this kid in the first place. However, this time Sasuke interrupted and said, "TSH, stupid old man," causing Naruto to burst out laughing before that laughter was interrupted when they both got punched in the head by me. "What did you hit us for, Bakorio?" asked Naruto with a pout as he rubbed his head, and Sasuke was the same. "Don't be rude," I said, and I paused on purpose. Ryukai quickly nodded and said, what a sensible key dash," but I suddenly interrupted him as I continued saying to this old man, and then I burst out laughing with Naruto and Sasuke joining me. "You rascals," yelled Rikai, making me sure that this journey wasn't going to be boring. Meanwhile, Itachi and Shursui were keeping Hitaru company at the front of the carriage while he acted as the coachman. "Sorry about the kids. They're just having fun," said Shursui apologetically when he heard how we were making fun of Ryukai. Hitaru seemed less nervous by now, maybe because I wasn't traveling with him on my own. "It's fine, Ryukai-san seems to be having fun too." Shursui nodded at this, agreeing with him, and then Itachi asked, "Hitaru-san, how long is it going to take us to reach the southern border of the Land of Fire?" Hitaru looked at the sky before he said, "It's a little bit cloudy today, so I suspect it might rain, delaying our journey, so between 6 and 8 hours and maybe more." "I see. You are right. The weather seems to be changing, and it will be hard for the carriage to move in such muddy terrain," replied Itachi, who has experience traveling from the many missions he accomplished. "It might rain, huh? I thought when I overheard their conversation. Well, I guess Mukai will have to wait for a while." Just like that, our journey continued peacefully for 3 hours with the kids bickering and having fun from time to time among themselves, or with Ryukai, who took a liking to them, and already started raining heavily to my enjoyment. Tac tac asterisk asterisk tac asterisk tac asterisk. The sound of the rain hitting on the roof of the carriage, along with the strong smell of the earth, made me feel calm and relaxed, like my spirit was being cleansed, even though the inside of the carriage was a little bit crowded with the addition of Shursui and Itachi. Thunder would roar from time to time, breaking this calm. But soon after, I find myself returning to the same serene state. That was until I heard a very far sound different from the roars of thunder. It was the pained scream of a child. I immediately stood up with a serious look on my face to the surprise of the people in the carriage other than Ryukai, who didn't know me well, and said jokingly, "What's wrong, Bakorio? Did you have a bad dream?" However, I simply ignored him and focused all my mind on locating the sound of the scream. Slowly, the sound of the rain started vanishing, then the sound of the carriage and the horse drawing it. And after all noise was eliminated, I finally heard clearly the sound of screams and someone asking for help. And right after that, I was woken up by the roaring sound of thunder. "What's wrong, Bakorio?" asked Sure Sway, who started having a bad feeling. "I heard the sound of a child screaming," I said, but Ryukai didn't take what I said seriously because I was only a kid, not to mention this guard Hitaru whom he trusted so much would have noticed such a thing if it was true, so he jokingly said, "Are you sure it's not the sound of thunder?" "I'm sure. Stop the carriage," I said as my body started leaking a murderous aura, which Ryukai took very seriously this time as he thought in fear this kid is more dangerous than any assassin that was sent after my life. The carriage immediately stopped as Hitaru opened the door, holding a dagger in his hand without any of his previous nervousness on his face, but Shursui immediately stood in front of him and said, "Stop. This is a misunderstanding." However, Hitaru didn't listen to him and was about to attack until he heard Ryukai speaking Hitaru stop. Sasuke and Naruto kept looking at what was happening worriedly, especially when they sensed the killing intent I kept hidden inside my heart. "I underestimated you," said Ryukai as he shot me a deep look, "but if there's a kid in danger, I will definitely rescue him. Can you lead us there?" "Ryukai-san, we can't trust such a dangerous individual," yelled Hataru hurriedly, but he was interrupted by me as I said, "You don't need to trust me. I didn't ask you to accompany me in the first place. TCH, sure Sway, Itachi, please take care of Naruto, and Sasuke, I will go check out what's happening." "No, I will come with you," said Naruto. Me too, followed Sasuke. Ryukai let out a laugh and said to Hataru, "Well, we can't be outdone by kids, right? Let's go." "Be careful then," I said before I shot Itachi, and sure Sway looked to protect the kids before anything else, and I started directing Hitaru to drive us to where I heard the sound coming from. It wasn't that far away, but it was muffled by the rain. That's why they couldn't hear it. However, the more we got closer to the entrance of a certain cave that was way off the road, the clearer the sound became, and they all turned serious and enraged at who could cause so much pain to a child. However, just as the carriage arrived near the cave, a tall, muscular man with short, messy black hair suddenly emerged from it. He had a very distinguished face, including a broad jawline, pronounced forehead, and noticeable creases under his eyes. He also had black triangular markings on each of his cheeks. This man seemed familiar for some reason. However, I couldn't bother with his appearance because the moment he appeared, he was already doing the hand signs of a jutsu I recognized. Dog, snake, horse, tiger, snake, dog, tiger. Not good, I thought, and I immediately grabbed Naruto and Sasuke and jumped far away from the carriage as I yelled to the rest, "Leave the carriage." Hitaru immediately tried to carry Ryukai, but he found him heavy, so fortunately for him, Itachi and Shursui helped him as they all jumped away, and just as we did. That man muttered, "Earth release. Fisher Jutsu," and soon after, A huge fissure that spanned a long distance appeared under the carriage, swallowing it whole and completely devastating the terrain, with the fate of the people that were in it unknown. Moments earlier, when that unknown ninja used the Earth Release, Fissure Jutsu, it immediately created a fissure on the ground beneath the carriage we were riding, and that fissure kept spreading horizontally and vertically, which in turn enlarged the area affected, devastating the terrain. As I jumped out of the carriage while carrying Naruto and Sasuke, each in one of my hands, I was suddenly hit by a wicked idea that could help me get back at those two kids and their stupidity and teach them a lesson at the same time Itachi and Shursui can handle that guy. But maybe I should spice things up for Itachi. Hopefully this will go as planned. This thought didn't take me even one instant thanks to my high reaction speed before I started observing the crumbling terrain and noticed even though we jumped away from the center of the fissure in time, we were still in the range of this jutsu, and in time we would be swallowed in it too, like the carriage and the poor horse that was drawing it if we don't act fast enough. That is, if I want to escape it. While still in the air above the fissure, I noticed Itachi exchanging a mutual look with Shursui before they quickly started doing similar hand signs and inhaled a huge amount of air to cast a jutsu I knew. It was the Wind Release, Great Breakthrough Jutsu. They both exhaled the air they accumulated at the same time, creating a strong air current that helped propel them from the range of the fissure along with Hitaru and Ryukai. However, at this moment, Itachi and Shursui, who had their Sharingan activated, finally noticed that I seemed to be struggling while holding both Naruto and Sasuke and trying to jump from one falling boulder to another to escape this hole. But it was to no avail, especially when I accidentally slipped on my last footing and started directly falling down with the huge boulders and the rubble following after me. No Sasuke. Itachi tried to rush at our side, with his red eyes wide in fear at the possibility of his brother getting crushed under all this rubble and losing him forever. And he felt his heart was being crushed when he saw the absolute fear in his brother's face as he clung to his friend, who seemed to be trying his best to escape, but nothing seemed to work as he seemed to be weighted down by the kids he was holding. Itachi rushed and rushed as he started to see things in slow motion as his adrenaline surged to impossible degrees, but he knew he wouldn't reach them in time. He watched as they were about to be smashed on the floor, and Bakorio hugged them both and softened their fall with his own body. He watched as boulders fell around them, surrounding them like a coffin with no way to escape. Of course, planned by Bakorio to make the situation seem even more hopeless. And then he saw as the last boulder came crashing down on them as his brother and poor Naruto closed their eyes from the terrible fear they were feeling while their friend Bakorio suddenly flipped positions with them as he stood on top of them and tried to protect them with his own body again. And then boom, the last boulder fell on top of them, and he couldn't see the result of it as they were surrounded by other boulders. But he knew at that moment everything was over. His brother was gone. The thing that he valued the most suddenly disappeared in front of his eyes, and the worst thing was that he couldn't detect them even with his Sharingan, so ended up releasing a blood-curdling scream. Oh, oh. Itachi couldn't believe what just happened as he held his head with his hands and started yelling, "Why did I believe another kid could take care of my brother? Why would I save another person instead of my brother? Why? Why?" Itachi almost suffered a mental breakdown as a deep feeling of regret and hopelessness overwhelmed him, and darkness took this opportunity and started to lay its seeds and slowly grew on his heart, feeding off his hatred, until a hand suddenly landed on his shoulder, bringing him back to reality. When Itachi raised his eyes, he saw the deep sorrow in his friend's eyes as he said to him, "We are under attack. We can't let our guard down." Itachi's eyes suddenly ignited with deep hatred and anger, and to the horror of Shursui. The three tomo on his blood-red Sharingan started slowly changing into three spiraling curves around the pupil as Itachi said with pure venom in his voice. "That's right. It's all that bastard's fault. I will make sure he will suffer the full extent of this wrath I'm feeling." The moment Itachi finished saying this, he immediately rushed to the entrance of the cave, where that man was still standing with a terrifying speed, unaware that he just awakened one of the most terrifying Mangekyo Sharingan. Shirsue's eyes widened in surprise as he sadly whispered, "So now you have them too, huh?" Before he immediately flickered and rushed to the man that caused his best friend such great anguish. Fudo, the man who caused this fake tragedy, stared arrogantly as Itachi was rushing at him and said, "Tisich, Yukinoa ninja are really like cockroaches. Why don't you just die all at once?" Itachi's rage intensified when this guy called his now dead brother a cockroach, so he immediately took out a kunai and rushed at Fudo, aiming to stab his throat. However, Fudo was no joke, as he was also very proficient in close combat, using his advantage in physical strength to its full potential. But Itachi was an Uchiha, and not any Uchiha, but a monstrous talent, and now one with a Mangekyo Sharingan to boast. So he easily saw through all of Fudo's blows before he even initiates them, which immediately forced the latter on the defensive. Fudo's arrogance started to subside a little when he saw that this kid he was facing was no joke. So he created some distance between them and said, "Tisich, kid, the fight is just STA dash." But he was immediately interrupted by someone who wasn't interested in his blabbering. It was Shui who arrived on the battlefield and said, "Shut up," and immediately transformed into tens of silhouettes surrounding Fudo in the middle. You think a stupid clone jutsu would make a difference here? Fudo's arrogant expression returned, but it quickly crumbled again when these clones started attacking, making him realize the danger he was in. These are all real. Impossible. I didn't see him do any hand signs. Yet the reality was in front of him, and he was immediately taken by surprise as Shui landed a hit on his back. Yet to his surprise, his attack simply created sparks when it landed, and Fudo immediately retaliated, but his hand simply passed through the body of the Shui that just attacked him. And what's this? It seems like his skin is covered in a transparent layer of rocks. And Shusue's analysis was on point, because Fudo was using a jutsu called Earth Release, Rock Armor. To use this jutsu, the ninja flows Earth Chakra through their body, absorbing the properties of the earth around them to form a skin-deep armor that is transparent and is only visible when light reflects off it. But in this case, it was very cloudy as it was raining, so Shui didn't notice it. This armor can defend from all forms of blunt force. At the same time, it enhances the user's strength and doesn't consume chakra after its activation, but requires stones in the vicinity of the user. Fudo looked at one of the Shusues and said, "I finally realize who you are. You are the famous Shui of the body flicker, huh? Well, I will make sure you dash." Suddenly a loud noise appeared behind Fudo, along with a strong light, and before he could react, a hand coated in lightning impaled him on the back, going through his heart and out of his chest. Fudo started coughing blood as he tried to turn his head and look at the man who murdered him in cold blood. But he died and only caught a glimpse of the kitsune mask the man was wearing and the blood red eye that was looking at him with absolute apathy as he died. Then, the lightning slowly disappeared as the man who appeared out of nowhere retrieved his bloodied hand and looked at Itachi's eyes, who was hiding and preparing a finishing blow while Shui was working as a distraction with astonishment on his face. These eyes, the Uchiha are really rising. I wish you were here to see this. Obito. Someone else appeared whose eyes are also different. Thought Kakashi, who just sneaked behind Fudo and killed him using his famous Chidori. What are you doing, Kakashi? This kind of death is too easy for him. Yelled Itachi with his eyes still full of anger, not satisfied with this quick outcome, as he was planning to capture this man and torture him to quench his hatred. But a voice suddenly yelled from behind him to his surprise, shining upon the darkness that was growing in his heart and slowly dispersing it, "Big brother." Itachi immediately turned around and looked at the source of this voice before he immediately rushed at his little brother, and they both hugged with tears falling from their eyes. As Itachi was tearfully hugging Sasuke in his arms and telling him how thankful he was that he survived, he was surprised when Sasuke, looked at him proudly, and his eyes started slowly turning blood red, and one Tomo appeared inside of them. So he couldn't help but exclaim in disbelief. Sasuke, you actually awakened your Sharingan. Sasuke puffed his cheeks and nodded proudly, while saying soon, I will be like you, brother. Itachi couldn't help but think about the eyes he himself awakened and have yet to discover their abilities before he shot his friend Shursui, and a certain kid a deep look and thought, I finally understand you, Shursui. I too hope Sasuke doesn't need to awaken them, and if that day ever arrives, hopefully it will be like this. Meanwhile, I approached Shursui and Kakashi, who were investigating Fudo's identity from whatever items he left behind. Of course, this guy, Fudo, is someone I barely remember as he was a villain in the early parts of Shippuden. So it took me some time to recognize him, especially as his appearance was 10 years younger right now. According to the original story, the first time Itachi encountered Mukai and Tobi was during the annual visit of the daimyo of the Land of Fire to Konoha. Itachi was 8 years old at the time and only a genin. He was part of Team 2 along with Tenma Izumo and Shinko Inari, and because their team was the best at that time, mainly thanks to Itachi being part of it, they were granted the honor of joining the escort of the daimyo, which was a great honor. Of course, the daimyo wasn't going to be simply escorted by a mere genin team, so he had with him a group of Umbu, which Mukai was a part of, as well as 2 members of the 12 Guardian Ninja Guards. The 12 Guardian Ninjas are a group of people gathered from all around the Land of Fire, and whose sole purpose is to guard and protect the daimyo of the Land of Fire, even at the cost of their own lives. They were all proficient in their own ways, and all of them were at least Jonin level. The most well-known member of this group is Asuma Sarutobi, the son of the 3rd Hokage, a Jonin respected by everyone in Konoha. However, this simple incident of escorting the daimyo that was supposed to be a peaceful journey proved to be a turning point for many people, because during this escort mission, they ended up being approached by a masked man pretending to be a fool, so no one took him seriously, and they let their guard down. That is everyone other than Itachi, who quickly warned his friends to be careful, and Mukai, who is never not careful and possibly even sleeps with both eyes open. Once Tobi was near enough to the group, and they were finally about to consider him as a threat, it was already too late as he took them by surprise, and before they could react, they were absorbed into a Genjutsu, showing just how terrifying he was catching all of these people in a Genjutsu. This was the turning point for Mukai because this was the start of his betrayal as he pretended to have fallen for Tobi's Genjutsu, instead of doing his best and protect the daimyo. After all, with his Byakugan, it would be very hard to land him in a Genjutsu, even if the user is an Uchiha, unless they were using the ability of a Mangekyo Sharingan. Not to mention that he was being careful from the start. As for Team 2, only Shinko landed prey to Tobi's assault, while Itachi and Tenma has some proficiency in Genjutsu and were ready for it, so they were able to evade it in time. Seeing that everyone else was immobilized, the 2 of them tried to stand in front of the daimyo to protect him heroically. But while Itachi was careful and kept trying to analyze the situation first before taking action, Tenma was hot-headed and immediately rushed at Tobi recklessly while wielding a kunai, and even though Itachi tried to stop him. It was already too late as his attack simply passed through Tobi, who then turned around and killed him to the horror of Itachi. This was the turning point of Itachi, who experienced his first true loss, the loss of his friend and teammate, and the grief from this incident was so great to the point that he directly awakened a 2-Tomo Sharingan and vowed to protect those dear to him, especially his little brother. As for his other teammate Shinko, she immediately decided to abandon her dream of being a ninja and settle down in Konoha as a civilian. Of course, this was all possible because in the end they were saved when Tobi sensed Kakashi approaching the scene, and he didn't want to meet him yet, so he retreated. But the damage from this incident was far from over, because right after this, the 12 Guardian Ninja were deemed incompetent in protecting the daimyo, so their group was disbanded. However, they didn't want to accept this fate and humiliation, especially as some of their members didn't agree to Konoha's passive ways in the previous wars, yet they kept being supported by the daimyo. So, one of the members of this group, named Kazuma, gathered 5 other members, and under his leadership, they started planning on how to destroy Konoha and invade other countries. However, when the daimyo found out, he ordered the other 6 members, which included Asuma and Chiriku, who is part of the ninja temple of the Land of Fire along with the other 4, to stop them. From these 12, only 3 people survived: Asuma, Chiriku, and Kazuma, who was actually defeated by Asuma, but tricked him and faked his death. Kazuma was a master in Fuinjutsu. So, after this plan failed, he went ahead with another plan he was plotting for a longer period. He was actually skilled enough to the point that during the Nine Tails incident, he noticed that its chakra was so great and untamed that some of it leaked in the air. So, taking this opportunity, he used his masterful Fuinjutsu and captured this leaked chakra, and 5 years after the incident, he sealed it in the body of his son, Sora. So, the screams from earlier are probably Sora's, huh? Fucking Kurama spreading his chakra on every damn place. My face couldn't help but turn into a frown as I thought about this. And when I approached Shursui and Kakashi with Naruto staying close to me, I noticed Shursue's eyes flickering with an unpredictable meaning as he decided to ask the question that kept bothering him. Bakorio-kun, how did you survive that fall? I'm pretty sure you seemed to be helpless during that situation. My face couldn't help but turn into a mischievous smile. Why do you ask? Aren't you glad we survived? Shursue's face was calm and still as he said, No, I'm glad you guys survived. I don't know how I was going to live with the burdens of your lives on my back. Not to mention. His last words were muttered while he was looking at Itachi, who was interested in this conversation, so he started approaching us while holding Sasuke's hand. Well, since you were glad, I can tell you that it was all thanks to Kakashi over here, who saved us at the last second. Just before we were crushed under those stones, he appeared under us and took us underground with him, saving us at the last second. Shursue's eyes widened a little at this as he looked at Kakashi. As for Itachi, he immediately bowed to Kakashi and thanked him from the bottom of his heart as he said, Thank you so much, Kakashi-san. I will never forget this favor. Kakashi seemed to have remembered something as he said in melancholy, I wish there was someone there for us. My eyes flickered a little when I heard this, and Shursui, who kept observing me, also noticed this and just couldn't put to rest a doubt that kept growing in his mind. Did he do all of this on purpose? But this means he already knew about Kakashi tailing us, not to mention betting his life and the kids like this. How can he be so sure that Kakashi will save them? At this point, Shursui couldn't help but look at Naruto, who was still fearful of this incident and kept clinging to me, and Sasuke, who was still scared but was showing off his one Tomo Sharingan to his brother. Or maybe he never considered this a risk. Maybe he... Shursui was suddenly interrupted from his thoughts as he suddenly noticed the kid he was secretly observing looking at him with a weird smile that made his spine shiver. After sending W warning to Shursui so that he stops observing me like a creepy stalker, I casually retrieved a scroll and walked towards Fudo's body. Then I placed it on top of him and did a simple hand sign which sealed the body inside of it. This is the Ninja World's version of a portable inventory. However, it could only contain non-living objects inside it, otherwise it would have been great. Afterward, I put that scroll inside my bag and turned to Kakashi, who was watching me with a weird expression behind his mask. Thank you so much for saving us, but now is not the time for this. After all, we have yet to find the boy that was screaming in agony. Kakashi gave me a deep look, and before he could respond, 2 people approached us. They were Hitaru and Ryukai, who immediately started thanking Itachi and Shursui for helping them. Thank you, kids. I can't imagine what would have happened to me if you didn't offer your help. Itachi, whose eyes were now back to normal, shot them a complicated look because not long ago he was blaming himself for helping these strangers instead of his brother, which almost ended up with him losing him. Shursui, who noticed his friend's dilemma, nodded at them with a smile. Don't mention it. We're traveling together after all, so we need to take care of each other. Hitaru nodded at Shursui with appreciation, and they didn't mind Itachi's silence, as they simply assumed that he was still shocked by almost losing his little brother. It was then that Kakashi, who was interrupted by them, spoke. Bakorio's right. We can't waste our time here. We still haven't found the kid that was screaming, although the sound seems to have subsided. Shursui nodded at him and gave me one last sneaky look before he turned around and started walking toward the entrance of the cave. You are right. Let's check out this cave. That man seemed to be protecting it when we came. But then he suddenly stopped as if he just thought of something. So he turned around and said, I will investigate it with Kakashi. You guys will stay here under the protection of Itachi and Hitaru. Itachi immediately agreed, clearly not wanting to let his brother alone again, while Hitaru and Ryukai didn't want to face any more unnecessary danger. So they also agreed, especially with the presence of an Anbu around. As Shursui and Kakashi carefully entered the cave while surveilling the area with their Sharingan in case there were any hidden traps. Itachi turned to me at this point, noticing the slightly tattered clothes on my back, which reminded him of how I tried to protect Naruto and Sasuke using my body. So, with a grateful look on his face, he said, Thank you for protecting Sasuke and Naruto with your body earlier. Are you injured? This is what you call killing 4 birds with 1 stone. I thought smugly at my achievement when I heard Itachi thanking me. After all, I not only helped Sasuke awaken his Sharingan and Itachi awaken his Mangekyo Sharingan, but I also got Kakashi out of his cover and taught Naruto a valuable lesson that in this world, being careless without strength is a sin. The expression on my face, however, was full of innocence as I said, You don't need to thank me. After all, they are both like my little K brothers. TCH, I almost said kids there. Itachi simply nodded at me, ignoring my blunder, which made both Sasuke and Naruto bashful and extremely happy, easing some of the heaviness on their hearts from the previous incident. But I noticed someone kept looking at me secretly with a suspicious look on his eyes from time to time, while thinking, is this kid really that weak? This was, of course, Hitaru, who never once trusted me even before the start of this journey. Minus 10 minutes later. Kakashi and Shursui emerged from the cave with grave expressions on their faces, and without any surprise, they weren't alone as Shursui was gently carrying an unconscious kid on his back as they slowly approached us. So this is Sora, huh? He should be around the same age as us. I thought as I looked at Sora, the kid Shursui was carrying. Sora has straight shoulder length, dull bluish-gray hair in an asymmetrical style with a single lock of hair falling into his face and brown-colored eyes, and I couldn't help but think that he was quite cute. But then I suddenly thought, but where is that bastard father of his? I was surprised at how little time they took to locate Sora, as they didn't seem to have gone through any kind of battle. After they arrived at our location, I directly asked them, What did you find? Kakashi didn't want to speak, as he simply shot Naruto a look while Shursui struggled a little before he said, When we entered the cave, we found a huge ritual room covered in various seals clearly made by a master in Fuinjutsu. As for this kid, he was laying on his back on a raised altar in the middle of the room where all the seals seemed to be converging, but we don't know their purpose as of yet. But we are sure that this was the cause for the kid screaming. From the look Kakashi gave Naruto, I can assume they already know what was done to this kid, but they probably don't want to discuss this in front of strangers, especially when the matter concerned the Nine Tails chakra. There was no change in my expression as I thought of all of this before I said, Did you find anyone else inside? Shursui shot me a weird look as he thought, does he know something about these people? But he calmly shook his head and said, No, other than this kid, we didn't find anyone else. I see. I said with a calm look with no one, noticing the deep darkness swirling in my eyes as I detected someone watching us from afar. Meanwhile, as we were discussing this, Sora's father Kazuma exited a hidden passage that was connected to the cave and started observing us from the top of a hill with a twisted expression on his face as he murmured, "These Konoha bastards, they actually killed Fudo, and now Sora landed in their hands. At least from how very little urgency they seem to have. They probably don't understand that I sealed a part of the Nine-Tails chakra inside Sora to make him a pseudo-Jinchuriki. I need to retrieve him no matter what, and send him to someplace where he can grow undetected until the time to use him against Konoha arrive." Kazuma was a tall man of tan complexion. He wore a purple cheap Halai garment that was lined with yellow, blue, and gray and straw sandals. His hair was white and long while worn out in texture. He also had a pale, long scar stretching diagonally across his face, presumably from Asuma's final attack on him. This wasn't his original appearance, as previously his hair was brown and short, and in his current state, even Asuma, who knew him for a long time, might not recognize him. When he noticed that we were about to set out on our journey, he started following us silently to prepare an ambush to retrieve Sora. But what he didn't know is that he already got his feet entangled in the web of a deadly spider, and this spider already categorized him as its prey. After talking for a while, we decided to visit the nearest village or town and spend the rest of the day there before we continue with our journey. As for the matter regarding Sora becoming a pseudo-Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tails and Fudo who attacked them out of nowhere, I noticed Kakashi writing something on a scroll before he summoned a miniature pug, which was his famous summon Pakin, and instructed him to take it back to Konoha. After Kakashi finished reporting this incident, I approached him and said, "You seem to want to follow us, huh?" Kakashi nodded at me and said, "Indeed, you should know that Naruto can't be left unprotected, right?" Ho 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 already thought of a reason to explain your unwanted presence, huh? But you won't be getting your way easily. You can join us, but you should remove that mask of yours and accompany us directly. After all, having an Umbu with us would draw many eyes to us, I said, and for some reason, Shursui actually approached us and said, "That's true, Kakashi-san. You don't need to hide anyways now that we know you are following us." I shot Shursui a suspicious look as I thought, why is this kid agreeing with me? Is he concocting something behind my back? But Shursui simply smiled without saying anything and waited for Kakashi's response, who ended up letting out a sigh and said, "Fine. I will make sure nothing wrong happens," thought Kakashi. Then he slowly took out his kitsune mask and retrieved a Konoha headband from his bag and wore it to cover his Sharingan. He noticed that I was staring at his eye with clear intrigue, so he asked me, "What's wrong?" But he was surprised when I simply smiled at him mysteriously and said, "You have a very unique eye," before I turned around and went back to Naruto and Sasuke, who were watching the unconscious Sora curiously while thinking about how great it would be to have an ability like Kamui. Kakashi, for some reason, felt like all his secrets were exposed when he saw that smile of mine, so he couldn't help but let out a whisper, "What a weird kid." To his surprise, Shursui experienced something similar to this with Bakorio in the past when he hinted at his Mangekyo Sharingan, and even though he didn't understand why Bakorio said this about Kakashi's eye, he still had a complicated expression on his face as he replied with a whisper of his own, "I agree." Before leaving this area, we first helped Ryukai dig out his carriage to retrieve his valuables. Well, I say we, but it was mainly thanks to Kakashi, who did everything, as he was the only one who could use Earth Release in our ever-growing group. After we were done, Ryukai, who knew this area very well, informed us that there's a small town nearby called Golden Tree Town. This town gained this famous name because it had special trees that, in the fall season, Instead of their leaves turning yellow or red, they instead turned to a gold color, making it one of the biggest attraction sites of the Land of Fire. Ryukai was very familiar with this town, as he would pass by it many times when he's traveling between Konoha and the Land of Tea while selling his merchandise. Ryukai's a merchant who values quality over quantity. That's why although the merchandise he transports is small in size, it only contains the rarest of herbs for medical or consuming purposes. Some clans in particular use his services like the Nara clan and Akimichi clans who are very knowledgeable about medicinal herbs, which is how the Akimichi clan's pills which they use to power their secret jutsu come from. Meanwhile, the weather didn't get any better and was still heavily raining even after we reached this town, so we didn't find many pedestrians roaming on the streets, but we noticed that this town had many nice views and souvenir shops. Clearly, their main income is from the tourists that comes in the fall. Ryukai took as directly to one he was familiar with, and the inn owner greeted him warmly. And once the rest of us went inside, the kids finally relaxed as Naruto immediately looked at me and said, "I'm hungry." The moment he finished saying this, Sasuke reprimanded him as he said, "Can't you think of anything other than your STO dash?" But we suddenly heard a strong growling sound coming from his stomach, making him turn bashful as we all started laughing and slightly forgetting the events of this gloomy day. Sasuke turned around and hugged his brother to hide his shame, and Itachi simply patted his head with a helpless face and said, "Oh, I'm also hungry. What about you, Shursui?" Shursui shot an envious look at these two brothers and how close they seemed before he smiled and said, "I'm starving." "I will take care of it. It will be my treat," said Ryukai with a warm smile on his big fat face. And so, we sat down on one of the tables of the inn and waited for our food while the kids kept arguing. I noticed that none of the other tables were occupied, so I asked Ryukai about it. "Oh, this wouldn't be the case if we were in the fall season. You know this town is famous for." He started telling us about the attractions this town has to offer, and Naruto was immediately excited and kept begging me to visit this place again in the fall to see these famous golden trees, which I reluctantly agreed to. After a while, and while everyone was waiting for the food they ordered, I said, "I'm going to the bathroom." However, to my surprise, Shursui immediately said after me with an apologetic look on his face, "I also need to go. Let's go together, Bakorio-kun." I shot him a weird look and said, "That's the creepiest thing I ever heard. Kakashi, you are an umbu. How can you let him say such a thing to a kid in public?" Kakashi simply turned his head away and ignored me, while the rest simply laughed except Naruto and Sasuke, who didn't even understand what I was implying motherfuck. I wanted to curse, but I changed my mind and simply stood up and asked the owner for the location of the bathroom. Shursui simply followed after me, with a slight frown on his face that didn't escape Itachi's notice, and felt that he was acting weirdly. What's Shursui trying to do? He was about to stand up and follow after them, but he decided to trust in his friend's judgment. After asking the owner for direction, Bakorio understood that the bathroom was a separate unit attached to the inn, and you need to go outside to access it, and inside it had multiple stalls. Shursui kept observing me, and since we were inside alone, I turned to look at him with a cold look in my eyes, lacking any of my previous childishness, and said, "What are you doing?" Shursui was at first surprised by my sudden change in behavior as he thought, is this his true self? But he then smiled and said, "Can I go to the bathroom?" We kept looking at each other's eyes for a while before I let out a sigh. "You are really annoying, you know?" Shursui chuckled a little and said, "You are the first person to consider me annoying." How narcissistic can one idiot be? I thought before I said, "Just say what do you want? Don't keep playing these stupid games. I know you've been observing me for quite a while now." Shirsue's smile finally disappeared from his face, seeing me addressing the issue directly. So he also decided to stop pretending and said, I want to ask you a few questions, and I will do anything to get the real answers. After all, I can't turn a blind eye to what happened to Itachi. To my surprise, the always gentle and harmless Shursui that always has a sunny smile on his face suddenly turned extremely cold as his eyes turned into blood red, but they didn't have the expected 3-tomo, but a 4-point will shape. He was directly showing his Mangekyo Sharingan, dropping all pretense. This kid is getting on my nerves, I thought as my murderous intent started gushing out. Meanwhile, as my confrontation with Shursui was happening, a similar scene was happening in Konoha as two elders, Hamura and Koharu, who were drinking tea over a table and discussing the humiliation they received by getting kicked out of their privileged position, were visited by the current Hokage of Konoha, Fugaku. What the hell do you think you're doing here, Fugaku? You are not welcome here, Scram. Don't waste our time, yelled Koharu, showing no respect to the Hokage when she saw Fugaku walking nonchalantly towards the both of them, while Hamura simply kept glaring at him, waiting to see his response. But they never expected his response to be so simple as he said, Don't worry, I don't want to waste my time either, before his eyes suddenly started transforming into 3 dots followed by 3 curves spiraling counterclockwise around the pupil, and he calmly made eye contact with the two of them. Huh? This kid actually dares to threaten me with his Mangekyo Sharingan. My killing intent couldn't help but start gushing out, especially since I knew what a huge risk his ability Kotoe Tsukumi could pose to me and anyone else for that matter who looks into his eyes. Seeing the murderous intent slowly gushing out of my body, Shursui understood that he was playing a dangerous game here, but he still decided to ignore it and coldly question me. When did you find out that Kakashi-san was following us secretly? This kid is really getting on my nerves. Should I kill him? This thought suddenly surfaced on my head, and for some reason, it made a shiver run down Shursue's spine as he almost felt a hand caressing his neck ready to crush it to his horror. But he suddenly woke up and found it was all an illusion and my murderous aura has disappeared. Consider yourself lucky. It's just too bad to lose your talent. I thought before I shrugged my shoulders and said, I will answer you when you ask politely. And then I did something that surprised him. I suddenly jumped to the window and left this building, and Shursui immediately yelled, Wait, as he started chasing after me. After a few seconds of chasing me, he noticed that I suddenly stopped making any sound and seemed to be hiding my presence from something as I approached a certain building with my Sharingan active. So he decided to mimic my actions. What's he doing? Thought Shursui, who deactivated his Mangekyo Sharingan, and a puzzled expression adorned his face as he too started moving stealthily. Before long, I arrived at the foot of a tall building while hiding in its shadow, and a second later, Shursui landed beside me and shot me an inquisitive look trying to get an explanation for what was going on. But I simply put my index finger on my lips to indicate to him to keep his stupid mouth shut. And for the first time, he actually decided to put some trust in me and didn't say anything. To Shursue's surprise, I started walking vertically on the wall of this 5-story building, which was one of the tallest buildings in this town, while still not making any sound. This kid moves like an experienced assassin. Shursui didn't know what to say as he saw a kid have this level of mastery in both his chakra control and body movement. When we were about to reach the top, Shursui finally noticed with his Sharingan a strong chakra signature hiding on one of the corners of the building. What's going on? Is this the friend he wants to meet? However, this thought was soon proven wrong as Shursui saw me suddenly disappearing in the shadows, and an instant later a scream was heard from the top of the building, so he quickly rushed up to see what was going on. Once on the roof of this building, Shursui was greeted with a weird scene of a severed leg falling to the ground and two people facing off against each other. One was the kid he was following, but now he was holding a kunai in his right hand and a nostalgic look in his eyes as his face and kunai were splashed with some drops of blood, which Shursui assumed were from the other guy's leg that was just severed. And in front of him was a muscular man with long white hair and a long scar on his face, which was twisted from the pain of losing his leg to the kid's sneak attack. And he was using a multi-section monk staff to stabilize himself. "Bakorio, what are you doing?" said Shursui, whose first reaction was to check if this was an enemy or not. Without averting my eyes from this dangerous man, I said, "This is the guy behind what happened to the kid we just found." Hearing what I said, Shursue's eyes immediately turned serious as he prepared himself for a fight. "Who are you, kid? And how did you escape my detection?" asked Kazuma with a perplexed look on his pained face while using some healing jutsu on his severed leg to stop the bleeding. "You think I would approach someone without assuming that they could be a censor? Hee, that would be too naive of me. Just like how you naively think that you could stop the bleeding, my face had a wicked smile plastered on it as I looked at the injured Kazuma, whose expression suddenly twisted when he noticed that his healing jutsu wasn't as effective as it was supposed to be. "Yo, you actually poisoned me?" asked Kazuma in astonishment, knowing that escaping this predicament suddenly became 10 times harder facing this kind of sneaky opponent whose first attack served to cripple his movement. "Well, sorry. I didn't have a stronger poison. Otherwise, we could have made this fight even shorter. I was really regretful, as the best poison I had was the one in my lethal kunais, which I used to sever his leg. As for why I could take a skilled censor like him by surprise." The moment I merged with the shadows, I activated my Mangekyo Sharingan and used my Yomi no Kuni to completely wipe out my presence. And before Kazuma could locate me, I appeared under him and the rest was obvious. "You!" Kazuma suddenly yelled and held his monk's staff above his head and started strongly twisting it, which in turn started creating a tornado around him. Shursui, seeing this, was about to take action. "Not good. This building is going to be destroyed if this continues, and the people inside it will be crushed by it. I need to stop him." However, before he could take action, Shursui noticed from the corner of his eyes that I already made my move as I rushed at Kazuma, who arrogantly said, "Kid, you are just a moth rushing to the flames." But I simply ignored his arrogance, and as a tornado started manifesting itself around him, making him even more confident. Shursui noticed me returning my lethal kunai to my bag and held my right hand up, and through his Sharingan, he could see chakra started accumulating on top of my hand in the shape of an orb. "What's this?" Shursue's eyes widened in surprise at the high level of chakra manipulation required for such a jutsu that even his Sharingan almost couldn't understand. Meanwhile, as I was creating the Rasengan, I was also tempted to yell Rasengan, but I wasn't a Naruto, so I simply analyzed Kazuma's location and sent the Rasengan on, where his abdomen was supposed to be easily penetrating the still-forming tornado, which was the result of him using the wind release, Twister Jutsu. A blue chakra explosion radiated when we made contact, and Kazuma ended up sent flying through the air as he murmured, "Impossible! How can I be defeated by a kid ag?" as he finished his. Lamenting, he also threw up blood and lost consciousness while mid-air as he started falling from this high building, but I quickly caught him by using chakra strings before I pulled him up. "Amazing! What was that jutsu you used?" asked Shursui curiously. I glanced at him briefly before I turned my attention to Kazuma and started restraining him and putting some seals on him that restrain his chakra before I responded. "It's called Rasengan. This jutsu is probably the highest form of pure chakra manipulation." Shursui was surprised and nodded in agreement. After all, He just witnessed its power that could match even Kakashi's Chidori, and he knew that even if he used the power of his Sharingan's Eye of Insight to its full power, it won't be easy to copy this jutsu, and might be even impossible. After all, this was the masterpiece created by the fourth Hokage. Back at Konoha, at the same time Bakorio was done with Kazuma, two of Konoha's ex-elders completely lost their free will as they were both trapped inside Fugaku's Jinjutsu, and their two guards suddenly barged in the room. But they were simply greeted with Koharu, still yelling at Fugaku, while Hamura interjected from time to time, and after a long argument between the two parties. Fugaku finally left, taking with him the freedom of these two, while their guards didn't have any idea that it happened. Now this hidden threat is dealt with. I should focus on those spies, thought Fugaku before he calmly walked back to his office, unaware that his eldest son had just awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan. Seeing the amazement on Shursue's face, I couldn't help but think about how incredible and versatile the Rasengan is. Normally a jutsu would only reach rank A when you add to it a chakra nature which would greatly raise its strength. But the Rasengan reached this rank with only pure chakra manipulation, and it reached a level of power that even rivals something like the Chidori. This is without mentioning its other forms like the giant Rasengan or the double-handed Rasengan and whatnot. The Chidori, which is the personal jutsu created by Kakashi, was invented after he failed to incorporate his lightning chakra nature into the Rasengan. But success was still achieved from this failure, and he ended up creating the Chidori instead. This goes to show that not any person can add chakra nature to such a high-level jutsu. Kakashi didn't succeed, and his teacher Minato, the creator of the Rasengan, also didn't succeed before he died. So, what happens when chakra nature is added to the Rasengan? Well, Naruto added the wind nature and created the wind release, Rasen Shuriken. A jutsu so broken that it could one-shot almost anyone hit by it if they aren't fast enough to dodge it or have a Rinnegan to absorb it. But Naruto's success in incorporating wind nature chakra into the Rasengan was nothing more than pure cheating instead of a feat of genius. Because in canon before he did this, Kakashi revealed to him the secret of the shadow clone jutsu and how the clones can share their experience with their original. So taking advantage of his unique situation, Naruto summoned countless clones thanks to the help of the huge chakra reserves he has from being Kurama's Jinchuriki, and started doing mass training, which sped up his training speed by countless times. Normal people can also create many shadow clones, but they won't have enough chakra left to cast jutsu through them. But Naruto was different. That's why he was able to create the Rasen Shuriken in the end. While I was contemplating the versatility of the Rasengan, Shursui suddenly seemed to have thought of something and said in an angry voice, "So you were pretending from the start? You did all of that on purpose, didn't you?" I understood that he was referring to the Fisher incident, so I simply shrugged and said, "Yes, so what?" Shursue's face turned livid in anger as he yelled, "What if something went wrong? You risked losing the lives of your friends. And for what? What if Kakashi didn't rescue you in time as you planned?" I looked in annoyance at this guy and raised one finger to his face. "First of all, stop yelling. I can hear you clearly, T-Sich." Then my face turned serious and raised a second finger. "Secondly, I didn't risk the lives of my friends and had plenty of other ways to save them if Kakashi didn't arrive in time as I planned." And then I raised a third finger with a smirk that annoyed Shursui even more. Third, and most important of all, I wanted Sasuke to awaken his Sharingan, and for Naruto to understand the importance of strength if he wants to protect the people he cares about. After all, this world is very cruel. My smirk couldn't help but turn into a melancholic face when I remember my time in the war, which surprised Shursui and made his anger subside a little, and I quickly followed by saying, "Not to mention, Would you rather Itachi end up awakening the Mangekyo Sharingan while experiencing a real loss? Shursue's face was hesitant. After all, he understood all these points I was making, but he just selfishly wanted a better way to achieve these results without traumatizing everyone like that. Shursui. Shursui raised his eyes when he heard me call his name and was surprised when I said to him, "Just think about it this way. If I did this to you, would you be mad? And do you actually think that you're the only one smart enough to realize all of this?" Shursue's eyes widened in surprise as he said, "You mean?" "Yes, both Itachi and Kakashi have their doubts. Kakashi even went further and mentioned that I might have unknown intention in the report he sent about the incident." At this point, Shursui couldn't help but grow fearful at the level of planning that was going on behind the scenes. When did he check out Kakashi's report? And just how many steps ahead did he think before even acting? "Oh, Shursui, you are 5 steps away from realizing that I'm 10 steps ahead all the time, haha." I couldn't help but let out a laugh as I finished tying up the unconscious Kazuma before I simply jumped away from the building and left back to the inn. "Wait, what about?" Sigh. He left me with a heavy work. With a helpless face, Shursui picked up Kazuma and started going back to the inn. When we arrived, we found the food was already served and they were just waiting for us to come back from the bathroom. Naruto was the first to complain with a pout on his face. "What took you so long?" While Itachi asked with a perplexed face when he saw me return alone, "Where's Shursui?" I patted Naruto's head as I sat between him and Sasuke and said sorry, before I turned to Itachi and said with a mischievous smile, "He's doing some workout and will be here soon." Right after I finished saying this, Shursui walked inside the inn holding a large man on his back with a helpless expression on his face, surprising everyone. Then, when asked about the man's identity, he started explaining what happened after we left the inn, which made Kakashi immediately check if the binding on this guy were tight enough. And he was surprised when he found out that he was tied with no way to escape and even had some seals that restrained chakra carved on him. Shursui said Bakorio did all this. Just how much is he hiding? Thought Kakashi, while shooting a wary look at the boy enjoying his food without any regard to the world around him. "A team will be coming soon from Konoha to retrieve the kid. Once they arrive, we will send this guy with them too," said Kakashi, surprising everyone that someone will come to take the unconscious Sora back to Konoha, especially those who didn't know that he had some of the Nine Tails chakra sealed in him. I shot him a look before I turned my attention to the food and enjoyed the amazing delicacies this town had to offer. The thing I liked the most was a dessert that was made with wild honey extracted from bees that build their nest on the golden trees. It looked like a sponge cake and was glazed with gold-colored honey, and it tasted amazing. I couldn't get enough of it, and I made sure to order this honey in the future for when I reopen my shops. And just like that, our time in the inn passed peacefully as we each returned to our rooms. We ordered 4 rooms and separated into 4 groups. Kakashi was staying with Sora, Ryukai with his guard Hitoru, Shursui with Itachi, and they were guarding Kazuma, and me with Naruto and Sasuke. 1 hour later, I was peacefully laying on my bed while looking at Sasuke, who was excitedly using his Sharingan and toying with Naruto until I finally sensed some people approaching our location at a fast speed. "So, they're finally here, huh? I wonder who was sent by Konoha." While everyone was staying in their own room as it was still heavily raining outside, a group of 3 people wearing Konoha's standard ninja outfit entered the inn, and they consisted of 2 males and 1 female. Surprisingly, they were people I knew from the anime and encountered a little in the war, but I never had a proper meeting with them and got to know them. Not that I am interested in meeting them in the first place, except for a certain weird-looking member of their group, since he will turn out to be a true legendary character of this world and widely renowned as the greatest taijutsu user. The trio from Konoha were Asuma, Guy, and Kurenai, and they were able to follow our trail to this in thanks to Kakashi's dog summon, who came back with them after delivering the message. Kakashi's summon was always a mystery to me when I watched the anime, since they were never explained why he could actually summon dogs that could talk. Meanwhile, the Inuzuka clan that specializes in raising dogs didn't have such talking dogs. So, I did some investigation and found out that it was something unique to the Hitaki clan. This clan had a lot of history and unique skills, from their strong kenjutsu, which made Kakashi's father famous, to their weirdly talented bloodline that could produce ninja-like Kakashi's father, the White Fang Sakumo, and Kakashi himself. But other than being ninja, their main interest was farming, and one day, one of the Hitaki ancestors ended up meeting a talking dog and forming a contract with him. As for the origin of that dog, it was kept as top secret even among the Hitaki clan members. But they kept making contacts with these dogs and using them to protect their farms for generations. After the trio entered the inn, they immediately approached the counter to ask for Kakashi's whereabouts, and then owner immediately noticed their Konoha headbands, so he greeted them politely and was ready to help them out. After all, in a land of fire, the daimyo might be the one ruling the country, but Konoha was the one protecting it from the invasion of other hidden villages, not to mention that you wouldn't want to offend a Jonin-level ninja in general. "How can I help you?" said the inn owner, and he couldn't help but feel weirded out by a certain member of this group whose eyes were twinkling in excitement. He was a tall, well-muscled young man with fair skin and a strong jawline, a somewhat large nose, and black hair. His most distinctive feature was his shiny bowl-style haircut and his thick eyebrows. He was wearing a tight, green jumpsuit, orange-striped leg warmers, and a standard Konoha flak jacket. This is, of course, none other than Guy, who was looking around excitedly, while yelling, "Kakashi, my lifelong rival. Show yourself and let our youth shine with the light of our passion." Asuma, noticing the owner was weirded out and knowing that both Guy's behavior and his appearance deserved this kind of reaction, shot him an apologetic look as he rubbed the back of his head and said, "Please don't mind our friend here. He's just excited about meeting his friend. Anyways, can you please tell me in what room a white-haired man with his headband covering one of his eyes is staying? He probably already informed you of our arrival." The owner, understanding that they were ninja from the same village as the previous group and probably had some business with each other, gave them Kakashi's room number without much hesitation, since he couldn't stop them either way if they wanted to forcefully search for Kakashi. And Asuma didn't waste time as he thanked the owner and directed Guy and Kurenai to Kakashi's room. Asuma was about to knock on the door, but Kakashi's cold voice immediately said from the inside, "Come in," and before Asuma could reply, Guy immediately barged in, rushing to hug Kakashi, that was recently distancing himself from others after tragedies that he kept encountering in life. But Kakashi didn't share his enthusiasm, and Guy was immediately met with a kunai on his throat as Kakashi looked at him coldly. "What are you doing here?" Guy started sweating hard as he gulped down in nervousness and said, "KK Kakashi, stop. We were sent here after the Hokage received your report." Kakashi retrieved his kunai at this point and looked at Asuma for confirmation and said, "Is this true?" Asuma nodded at him and said with a frown, clearly displeased at Kakashi's earlier behavior, "Yes, it's true." Kakashi didn't offer Guy any apologies as he coldly looked at Kurenai, who was skilled in Jinjutsu, and said, "Check why the kid's not waking up, and you two follow me. I need your help to confirm something." Then, Kakashi walked past them without waiting for their response in the direction of Shursue's and Itachi's room, where Kazuma is held captive. "This guy gets on my nerves every time I see him. Who does he think he is, bossing us around like this?" said Kurenai, in displeasure clear in her voice and face. Guy, seeing that his rival was getting on everyone's nerves again with his distant attitude, tried to help out at this point and said, "Anyways, This kid has nothing to do with it, so you should really check his condition. And I'm sure there's a reason on why he wants us to come with him." Asuma let out a sigh and said to Guy, "You really deserve a better rival," while Kurenai simply snorted, "Humph," and went to check on Sora, who was still unconscious until now. Guy started shining with his aura of youth again and said, "No, Kakashi and I were destined to be rivals." Asuma helplessly looked at him before he turned around and started following Kakashi, and Guy did the same with a hard-to-discern sadness on his face. Inside the room, they found Shursui and Itachi talking with Kakashi about the people that were sent by Konoha, and when Asuma entered, he couldn't help but feel his eyes drawn to the white-haired man tied and left laying on the floor of the room. At first, he simply found him familiar, but then he took a good look at all his features and couldn't help it as his mouth opened wide in shock as he confirmed the scar on the guy's face and confirmed that it matched something from his past, and ended up exclaiming, "Impossible!" Kakashi, noticing this, asked him with a frown, "What's wrong?" Everyone was intrigued with his reaction, and Asuma quickly explained to them why he was shocked. "I'm sure this is Kazuma, a former member of the 12 Guardian Ninja that rebelled against the daimyo and attempted to take his life. But I'm sure I killed him with my own hands. How did he end up here and involved in all this mess?" Kakashi seemed to have confirmed something as he said, "So, that's why I kept finding him familiar, huh?" At this point, Itachi and Shursui shot each other a look of amazement as they thought of the same thing. This notorious guy was actually taken down by Bakorio on his own. However, at this point, Kazuma started to slowly open his eyes as he coughed up some blood and looked at everyone in the room before his eyes landed on Asuma and slightly widened as he said, "Who would have thought I would meet you again in this condition, Asuma?" Asuma finally couldn't help it as he asked, "You actually survived, Kazuma? How?" Kazuma started checking his condition and found out that he was both tied and sealed. "You guys did a good job tying me up." Asuma didn't like getting ignored, so he asked again in anger, "Answer my question." "Ha ha ha, cough, cough." Kazuma started laughing until he coughed blood again and said with a smile, "Is this how you greet your former comrade after we haven't met for 3 years? Kakashi intervened at this point and asked directly, "Where did you get all that Nine Tails chakra from?" "Oh, is Kakashi maybe suspicious of me?" I couldn't help but smile when I heard the question Kakashi asked. After all, the first thought that would come to mind when you find someone using the chakra of the Nine Tails is that it was taken from its Jinchuriki, whether using force or not. And since the Jinchuriki is just a kid and can't use the power of his tailed beast at all, the next person in line to be suspected of trying to extract the chakra of the Nine Tails from him would most likely be the closest person to him. And in this case, it was me, as Naruto was even living with me at this point. And the only thing stopping Kakashi from acting on this suspicion is the fact that I was actually the one that found out about the sealing that was happening and even captured Kazuma that was tailing us secretly in the end. But Kazuma's response surprised him. "You are Kakashi of the Sharingan, huh? Why do you think I would tell you any dash?" However, before he could finish, Kakashi chopped his neck, rendering him unconscious again before he said to Asuma coldly, "Take him to the interrogation unit and have someone explore his memories. We will know the truth then." And then he simply turned around and was about to leave the room. Seeing Kakashi about to leave, Guy immediately said, "Aren't you going back with us to the village?" Kakashi looked at him and said, "No, I'm staying here for now," before he left. Asuma shrugged at this and turned to Shursui and Itachi and said, "You guys did a great job. I will make sure to report your contribution to the Hokage and the village elders." Shursui had a helpless look when he heard this, which brought a smile to Itachi's face before he said, "It was Bakorio-kun who found out that we were being followed and captured this guy all on his own. He was also the one that heard the kids screaming despite the heavy rain and led us there. Otherwise, we wouldn't have found such a remote cave." Another wave of astonishment washed over Asuma, this time even stronger than when he found out that Kazuma was still alive. The disbelief on Asuma's face didn't disappear even as they were escorting Kazuma and Sora back to Konoha, prompting Kurenai to ask him, "Are you still thinking about that Uchiha kid?" Asuma was suddenly broken from his thought as he nodded to her. "Ah, I just can't believe a kid can be this strong, and he even can use the fourth Hokage's famous jutsu." Asuma simply didn't want to accept that someone such as Kazuma, who required great effort to defeat him, was actually defeated by a small Uchiha kid. Kurenai simply shrugged her shoulders and said, "Maybe someone taught it to him. Is this why you are still thinking about it?" Asuma nodded his head before he simply let out a sigh and said, "I just can't imagine how he will turn out when he grows up, and the circumstances around this kid are just too weird. Hopefully, the elders and the Hokage know what they are doing." This last sentence silenced Kurenai and brought a thoughtful expression on her face. Meanwhile, Guy's eyes simply started shining with his power of youth at the thought of having a stronger rival that was much more talented than even Kakashi. Back at the inn, the night passed peacefully as the hidden danger was dealt with. As for Mukai, I actually called him to come and meet us here at Golden Tree Town, but he decided he would rather not. When he found out that there were many people, and he wouldn't be able to sleep at ease, especially with Kakashi around. After all, no one likes to get impaled with a Chidori when he lets his guard down for an instant. TCH, my relaxing journey was ruined by these idiots. After this is over, I won't involve myself with any more trouble. I let out a sigh before I looked at the kids who already fell asleep before I too dozed off, but not before summoning a shadow clone to keep guard. Early in the morning, we all got up and had a delicious breakfast at the inn before we resumed our delayed journey. Ryukai actually had some connections in this town, and he got us a new carriage to travel on, so we didn't have to resume our travel on foot all the way to the land of tea. Good thing was that the weather today was sunny, so we enjoyed our trip to the border of the land of tea, even though the roads were still muddy from the rain, so that delayed us a little. But overall, it was better than getting swallowed by a fisher out of nowhere and having to wipe Konoha's ass again and again. When we started getting closer to the land of tea, a huge body of water started appearing in our view. Its water was crystal clear, and it was surrounded by a lot of vegetation. That's why we didn't see it until we got close enough to it. This was the southern lake, the meeting point I made with Mukai. At this point, Ryukai, that was being made fun of by Naruto, and Sasuke turned to me and asked with a smile, "Bakorio, should we stop and wait for your friend here?" The last thing I want is for that bastard Mukai to be my friend. My eyes couldn't help but twitch a little before I looked out of the window and saw the beautiful scenery of the lake and said, "Yes, here is fine. He should be waiting somewhere near the lake." "Okay," replied Ryukai before he ordered a Taru who was enjoying his talk with Itachi and Shursui to stop the carriage. Then Ryukai noticed the kids looking out of the window at Lake Southern with their eyes twinkling. So he said, "How about we eat our lunch at the shore of Lake Southern?" Naruto and Sasuke immediately turned to look at me with an excited expression on their little faces, and thinking that this was a good opportunity for me to relax too, I nodded and said, "That's a good idea." And that's how we ended eating our lunch while enjoying the breathtaking sceneries that Southern Lake had to offer, and to be honest, I didn't mind this kind of relaxation. Anything is better than seeing a lake of blood and corpses. But as my luck would have it, it was quickly broken when the paranoid Kakashi detected someone trying to approach us stealthily using the vegetation of this area as his cover and immediately shot a kunai in his direction while yelling, "Who's there?" The bushes started rustling, and out of them emerged the ever-annoying Mukai with a smirk on his face while holding the kunai Kakashi threw between his fingers and started speaking. "Umbu Captain Kakashi Hitaki. You never change, do you? Is this how you greet your old comrade?" Itachi and Shursui suddenly sprung up to their feet as they looked warily between Mukai and me, who's still ignoring everything and enjoying the food. Meanwhile, Naruto and Sasuke looked curiously at how everyone seemed so tense after this man approached us. Sasuke especially was surprised at seeing his brother so nervous, which was something he never saw before. If only he witnessed the ass whooping Itachi and Shursui received from Mukai. What a treat to the eye that was. Kakashi's looked coldly at Mukai as he unveiled his Sharingan and said, "Who would have thought we would meet again under these circumstances after you betrayed Konoha to work for Kiri?" Mukai simply shrugged his shoulders as he took a sip from the jug that was strapped to his waist and said, "Well, life is strange." Kakashi was surprised at how casual the usually careful Mukai was acting, not even activating his Byakugan, so he started monitoring their surroundings warily in case he had any helpers and said, "So what are you doing here?" Mukai looked around until he located me and was amused when he saw that I was ignoring what was going on and simply enjoying the food while everyone was on guard before he pointed at me and said, "Hey Brat, you are late." Huh? Don't tell me. The friend he wanted to meet is this dangerous traitor. Itachi sure sway, and Kakashi couldn't help but shoot me a weird look which turned much more weirder when they found out that I almost finished all the food while they were distracted by Mukai. Naruto couldn't hold his anger as he yelled, "Triple! Oh Bakorio, how could you eat everything?" Sasuke noticed I was about to pick the last grilled fish, so he quickly snatched it away from me and ran away while giggling like an idiot. "Hey Sasuke, it's rude to steal food like this," I yelled, but everyone couldn't help but have dark lines on their faces as Hataru said. "And you find it fine to eat everything on your own and leave us nothing? Where did all that food go in the first place?" It was really a miracle how someone this small could eat that much. I ignored Hataru and turned to look at Mukai, who I sensed way before we arrived at Lake Southern, as he kept tailing us for a while, before he showed himself, and now he was pretending like he was simply waiting for us all along. "Yo Mukai, come join us for lunch." Mukai chuckled a little as he started approaching us, which made everyone's nerves tighter, and said, "Sorry, I'm not a fan of bones. Plus, why did you bring all these people for our business?" What business could he have with Mukai? Is it related to the Nine Tails? This is bad. I don't think I could take Mukai on my own and protect the kids. And he also might have other helpers lurking around, including that kid Bakorio. What should I do? I noticed Kakashi was about to attack at any moment, so I said, "Kakashi, relax. He's not a traitor anymore," before I turned to the amused Mukai and said, "I only wanted to take the kids for a fun journey and relax a little. The rest are simply tagging along without even being invited." Kakashi and the rest couldn't help but want to beat me up when I made this comment, but it lightened the tense mood a little, especially when Mukai ignored them and looked at the almost finished food. "The view here is indeed great, suitable for a relaxing meal. Wait, I will get us something to eat." I smiled at the great acting of this guy and simply said, "Oh, how generous of you." And as Mukai started approaching the lake, I yelled at the two kids who were fighting for the last grilled fish that Sasuke stole from me. "Hey Naruto, Sasuke." With their faces full of food, they both turned to look at me curiously and said, "What munch you munch want?" Watch Mukai closely. Naruto and Sasuke tilted their heads and looked at what Mukai was going to do, a scene that would ignite their desire to become ninja even more, just so they can be cool. I try to act casually with Mukai to make this group of tense idiots relax a little, but I forgot that they weren't relaxed around me in the first place, not to mention seeing me act friendly with a potential enemy. So I simply made the situation worse as they all started watching nervously what Mukai is trying to do by approaching the lake. Then, to Naruto's and Sasuke's surprise, Mukai started walking on the water of the lake and observing it before suddenly, he kicked with the bottom of his foot, creating a small ripple. Then 3 large fish were dragged from it and held in the air with invisible strings, and he kept repeating this motion until he collected enough food for everyone present and started heading back toward us with a smug look on his face. Naruto's and Sasuke's faces were filled with amazement at this cool showcase. However, surprisingly, it wasn't just them, as the more experienced people in this group understood just how terrifying are the capabilities of this man from this seemingly peaceful scene. What a show-off. I muttered in annoyance, while looking at the smug look on Mukai's face that seemed to be carved in his bones. Kakashi's mind, however, was filled with shock. How can he be so skilled with the Hyuga's gentle fist when he's not even a member of their clan? What a monster to actually have such a strong mastery to use it with his legs and take out a group of moving fish with such great control, almost without creating any disturbance, and even sparing some attention to manipulate chakra strings with his hands to hold his catcher fish in place. This traitor can't be allowed to live any longer. Realizing how hugely he underestimated Mukai, Kakashi's eyes started turning colder as he signaled to Itachi and Shursui to be ready for a fight at any moment. Shursui and Itachi already understood how dangerous Mukai was. After all, they already fought and lost convincingly to the point that Shursui was almost forced to use his Mangekyo Sharingan if I didn't interfere at the last second, so they reluctantly nodded at Kakashi and waited for their opportunity. Wah, Mukai-san, that was so cool. Can you teach me how to do it? Said Naruto as he innocently approached Mukai with twinkling eyes, which made Kakashi and the rest much tenser. Meanwhile, Mukai, for the first time since he arrived here, had an actual genuine expression on his face. Probably because he likes children and their innocence because they reminded him of his kids. Of course, minus a certain kid he knows who didn't have an ounce of innocence. So he smiled at Naruto warmly and patted his head while saying, "You want to be a ninja?" However, before Naruto could respond, Sasuke, who thought so highly of his brother and Bakorio, didn't want to think that there was someone cooler, so he quickly said, my big brother Itachi and Bakorio are way cooler. Good boy, Sasuke. Good boy. I couldn't help but nod when I heard Sasuke, although I didn't appreciate that he mentioned me in the same sentence as Itachi. Naruto, on the other hand, simply ignored Sasuke and said to Mukai, "Yup, I will become the strongest ninja ever, even stronger than Bakorio." Mukai's eyes flickered a little as he shot me a look and found a very smug look plastered on my face to the point that he felt like he was looking in a mirror, which annoyed him. So he replied to Naruto, "Being stronger than Bakorio isn't that hard. How about you try to become stronger than me?" Naruto suddenly tilted his head and with the same innocent look stabbed a dagger at Mukai's ego as he said, "Why would I? Bakorio's way stronger than you." Tisich, ha, you hear that, Mukai. Even a kid can tell who's the boss here. I couldn't help but burst out laughing as I saw Mukai's face crumble by what Naruto said, and he almost fell back from impact of this blow. And hearing my laugh made him even more annoyed as he put down the fish he caught and was about to sit beside me. But I suddenly raised my hand and said, "Wait." Mukai looked at me in surprise, but I quickly explained to him with a smile, "These guys didn't get enough of last time's beating, so go have some fun with them first." Mukai's surprised face suddenly disappeared like an illusion as an amused smile replaced it, and he said while looking at the tense trio, "I didn't think you would actually warn me." Itachi couldn't help but yell at me, "What are you doing? Helping an enemy. Are you also trying to betray Konoha?" I looked at this guy that was still too young and inexperienced, being only 11 years old at this point, and decided to forgive him as I said, "Are you stupid, Itachi?" Itachi was about to speak again, but Shursui stopped him and said, "Itachi, stop." Mukai already noticed that we were going to attack him before Bakorio said anything. His warning is directed to us, not to Mukai. I clapped at this smart monkey and said with a serious face, "That's right. See how nice I am, Itachi?" Mukai knew the moment he turned his back on you and started walking towards the lake as he secretly used his Byakugan without you noticing and observed you signaling to each other. Anyway, fight if you want, but do it away from the kids. Itachi, realizing that I simply didn't want to involve the kids, nodded in embarrassment. However, I wasn't finished, and I suddenly looked at both Mukai and Kakashi as an ominous aura started gushing out of me like a broken dam, and said, however, no killing or fatal injuries are allowed from both sides. Otherwise, you wouldn't like what might happen to you. Mukai's expression immediately turned dead serious when he sensed the amount of killing intent emanating from me that made the animals in the area start running away as if escaping from calamity. Just how many people were killed with those small hands? Thought Mukai while looking Bakorio in surprise, and unsurprisingly, similar thoughts were going through the minds of all the people present, but suddenly the killing intent disappeared, making them feel like they were just hallucinating, but they knew they weren't. Kakashi quickly regained his calm and said to Shursui and Itachi, "Let's go," before he jumped to the lake and started running on the water until he reached a distance he deemed safe for us, and no shockwaves would reach our camp. Itachi and Shursui quickly followed after him, but not before asking me to take care of the kids, just in case, and I calmly nodded as a response. Meanwhile, Mukai shot me a weird look before he also turned around and started following them to the lake while calmly sipping on his alcohol. "Oi, Naruto, Sasuke, who do you think will win?" I suddenly asked, bringing the kids out of their confusion of the sudden development of the situation. Naruto, who was still amazed by the recent cool showcase, immediately said, "I think Mukai-san will win," but Sasuke immediately rebuked him and said, "Are you kidding? Big brother will easily beat him up in no time." "Well, you will find yourself disappointed, Sasuke," I thought with a smile on my face as I watched the fight that started. Minus 10 minutes later. I happily ate the fish Mukai, caught as I grilled them on a bonfire while the half Hyuga was fighting the 2.5 Uchiha. And right now, the results of the fight were already settled as Mukai sat beside me with some cuts on his outfits, while Kakahi, Shursui, and Itachi had multiple bruises all over their bodies, especially Itachi, who had 2 black eyes like a panda. As I was eating, I couldn't help but look at Itachi, and I ended up bursting into laughter again as I crazily slapped my thigh before I turned to Mukai and said, "Ha ha ha ha, Mukai. You never seemed more pleasing to the eye." Mukai wanted to puke when he heard these words coming from me, as he thought, "I hope I never seem like this again." Meanwhile, while Itachi felt like crying as he thought, what did I do to deserve this special attention? Clearly, Mukai made sure to turn him into a panda for some reason. So poor Itachi ended up getting some free makeup. After experiencing firsthand how strong Mukai truly was, we finally finished our lunch and decided to go on with our journey to the land of tea. Once we entered this country, we finally said goodbye to Ryukai and Hataru, as their destination was in a different direction than ours, while we continued our journey on foot to Port Degarashi while enjoying the scenery on our way there, and it didn't take us long to arrive. This port was a famous tourist attraction, so having great sceneries was obvious, so I simply decided to leave the kids with Itachi and Shursui to enjoy themselves while I go find Tsunade with Mukai, but someone clearly didn't want to leave us alone. It was Kakashi, who kept insisting on coming with us. "Fine, you can come, but don't ruin my business. You will keep your mouth shut during the negotiations," I said to Kakashi coldly, and Mukai too had the same expression as he knew they couldn't mess this up. "Okay," nodded Kakashi with a laid-back expression, and we directly started walking in the direction of a casino, which is where Tsunade was drinking and gambling right now. I didn't want to waste too much time looking for her, so I simply sent a shadow clone ahead of time to find her when we entered the land of the tea. Inside the casino, Tsunade was currently causing a mess in her drunk state, not even caring that it was only the afternoon while her apprentice Shizen tried her best to hold her back to no avail, and before we even entered, we could already hear a woman yelling at the top of her voice, "Bring more drinks," while slamming a gambling table, causing it to crack, and the ground under it started vibrating. "What the hell is going on?" thought Kakashi with a surprised expression, while Mukai's eyes simply started shining in hope of meeting this legendary ninja and the possibility of healing his kid. Once inside, we noticed that the casino manager was trying to reason with the drunk Tsunade to the best of his abilities, but nothing seemed to work, until we entered and she turned to look at us directly. Her gaze didn't last long on me or on Mukai because she didn't know us and we weren't wearing any headband that would affiliate us with the hidden villages, but Kakashi was a different story. After all, he was the grand student of her friend. not to mention how famous his father Sakomo was, and she also met him many times in the past during the Third Ninja War and knew about his tragic life. So she couldn't help but feel slightly surprised when she saw him and her drunkenness started subsiding. Kakashi felt the same way as his only visible eye widened in surprise as he said, "What are you doing here, Lady Tsunade?" Then he shot me an inquiring look that said, "Are you here to meet Lady Tsunade?" This idiot, I told you not to speak. I shot him a glare before I heard Tsunade's reply. "I'm just enjoying my life. What are you doing here, Kakashi? And who are these two that came with you?" Kakashi suddenly had hope in taking down Mukai with Tsunade's help, so he shamelessly said, "That guy over there is a traitor from the village. As for the kid, he's from the Uchiha clan. Lady Tsunade, can you help me take that guy out? He's really a huge danger to the village." Tsunade's eyes widened a little, and she narrowed her eyes at Mukai, who for the first time put on a very serious face. But to everyone's surprise, he simply took a step back and hid behind the Uchiha kid as a sly smile adorned his face. My face started twitching as I turned to Mukai and said, "You have no honor, do you?" Mukai put on a curious look on his face as he replied, "What is this honor you speak of?" Go foo. Never mind. I simply let out a sigh at this helpless case while Tsunade simply shook her head at Kakashi and said, "Konoha's matters do not concern me anymore." "But Lady Tsunade, this guy is real dash." "Okay, shut up, Kakashi. Stop messing with our business," I said while looking coldly at Kakashi, which surprised Tsunade. This kid is so relaxed. Was it just a coincidence that guy chose to hide behind him? But she didn't want to bother thinking too much, especially since she was still a little drunk, so she asked, "What business do you have, kid?" Kakashi tried to speak again, but I shot him a look to shut him up before I walked to Tsunade's table with a smile and said, "First of all, how can we talk without introductions? I'm Bakorio Uchiha, and this guy over here, as you can see, is my dear friend Mukai Kohinada. His family branched from the Hyuga clan a long time ago, so you could say that he's also from Konoha?" Tsunade shot a look at Kakashi for confirmation, and he reluctantly nodded his head. Seeing this, Tsunade looked at me and asked, "So what does a kid like you want from me?" "Oh, why the rush? How about we enjoy some drinks first?" "It will be on me," I said with a smile, but to my surprise, Tsunade had a nostalgic look as she said, "You remind me of a certain snake bastard I know." But then she smiled and said, "But I can't say no to a drink." Meanwhile, Shizen shot me a weird look which I noticed, but I decided not to read too much into it because I was focused on this beauty in front of me. But I will regret this decision very soon. "Waiter, bring some drinks to this beauty," I said as I sat down on the table in front of Tsunade, while Mukai kept standing behind me like the creep he is and using me as a human shield just in case Tsunade decided to change her mind and help Kakashi. However, instead of a waiter, we were actually approached by the manager that was trying to reason with Tsunade earlier, and he said, "I apologize, sir, but we can't offer this lady any more drinks until she pays off her debts." For some reason, I started feeling my pockets screaming at me, and I was about to stand up and leave, but a hand suddenly extended from in front of me and held me in place, feeling like a mountain was put over my shoulder, which contrasted with the cute look Tsunade was sending me. As she did this bitch is actually taking advantage of a kid. I couldn't help but let out a sigh as I shot her an angry look which made her cute look turn into embarrassment before I said, "H, how much is this debt?" I asked this question through my gritted teeth, and the manager simply dropped the bomb on me. 5 million Rio? My face turned a shade paler, prompting Shizen to think, what a poor kid, before she shot Tsunade an angry look. But then, an idea suddenly hit me as I said, "Oh, please write it off under the name Fugako Uchiha. We are from the same clan, and he's the new Hokage of Konoha. I'm sure he will pay you soon." The manager was tempted after he knew he couldn't get his money from a random kid, and if he could gain the favor of the new Hokage, this could be even greater for him and the family behind him. "But can you really use the Hokage's name?" asked the manager, and I simply said, "Oh, don't worry. I'm even traveling with his only two sons, so it should be no problem. Right, Kakashi?" "All right." Kakashi reluctantly nodded, and seeing the Konoha headband on his head made the manager more convinced as he brought us some drinks, and Mukai shamelessly picked one. "This was really a good trick to deal with your debts," said Tsunade, who started enjoying herself and thinking I was lying. But I surprised her when I said no, I was telling the truth. Suddenly, all the drunkenness disappeared from Tsunade's face and was replaced by a dumbfounded look as asked, "You mean the rumors are true and Konoha really has a new Hokage? And it's an Uchiha?" Well, I guess it's only been 3 or so days since the changes happened, and the news didn't spread widely yet, and only unconfirmed rumors reached here. At least the manager seemed to know the truth. Can't expect less from someone running a casino. I thought before I simply said, "Yes, Fugaku is officially the fifth Hokage of Konoha." EHHHH. Both Shizune and Tsunade yelled at the same time as she stood up from the table, causing something to jiggle violently, putting everyone in a very dangerous jinjutsu. After Kakashi recounted to Tsunade and Shizune everything that happened in Konoha, not to mention them, but even Mukai was dumbfounded at the sudden changes that occurred in the village. But what surprised them the most was when Kakashi told them about my fight with Danzo. And seeing me still alive and kicking in front of them is all the proof they needed to understand how strong I was. It seems the Uchiha are really going to rise under the leadership of Fugaku. Meanwhile, my Senju clan. Tsunade couldn't help but feel jealous at how low the once great Senju clan has fallen, leaving her as its only survivor to carry on its bloodline. Yet with how her luck is going, it doesn't seem she will pass on her bloodline, and it may end up dying with her. The Senju princess. How ironic. Seeing the sour mood her teacher was in, Shizun tried to liven things up and looked at me curiously before she said, "Bakorio, did you really fight Danzo?" Meanwhile, I was staring at Mukai with a huge smug smile that could even compete with Tsunade's melons in size, as Kakashi told him about all of my feats while fighting Danzo, and I couldn't help but enjoy the shocked look on this show-off's face. But then I was interrupted by Shizun's question, so I turned to her and said, "Yes, it was a really hard fight." Then I paused, and my expression turned extremely serious as I looked at Tsunade. "However, Kakashi didn't tell you about everything that happened." Kakashi immediately turned to me and said, "That's top secret information. You can't disc or dash." I quickly interrupted him, "Top secret my ass. I wonder how many spies there are in the village that already spread that information. Plus, Tsunade deserves to know about this more than anyone else. Or would you rather she hears it from an outsider instead?" Understanding the logic in my words, Kakashi reluctantly nodded and didn't say anything else. Meanwhile, Tsunade started having a bad feeling about what we were talking about, especially since it seemed like it concerned her one way or another. So, with a serious expression on her face, she asked, "What's he talking about, Kakashi?" Kakashi looked down sadly in silence, not knowing how to respond to her. So I answered in his place. "I'm sure you know that your grandfather Hashirama was an extremely blessed ninja." Tsunade started having a bad feeling about this as she said, "Yes, he was." Shizun looked at Tsunade worriedly as she listened to me, saying, "One of his blessings is his unhuman vitality and regenerative ability." The foreboding feeling that Tsunade felt kept getting stronger and stronger when she saw me let out a sigh, and Kakashi lowering his head, even more in shame, stopped beating around the bush and get straight to the point. "Fine," I said before I continued with a sympathetic look. "Orochimaru and Danzo invaded the privacy of your grandpa and extracted some of his cells for their sick experiments. And this is the reason Danzo was quite hard to take down, in addition to using a forbidden technique of my Uchiha clan." Tsunade's face suddenly froze for a few instants as my words kept repeating themselves in her head. But then a feeling of absolute rage overwhelmed her as she suddenly smashed the table with her fist while yelling, "What did you say?" Her fist penetrated the table and kept going until it smashed the ground and created a huge fissure and a small earthquake that almost destroyed the whole casino. People started screaming and running away from the casino in fear, including its own manager, as they looked at Tsunade the same way you would a monster, and thanked their luck they didn't anger her, but they might have lost their lives long ago with a single punch from her. Meanwhile, Mukai directly jumped away from this angry monster, while Kakashi and Shizen covered their eyes to block the shockwave her punch created. What a crazy power! This woman never stops fascinating me. I thought as I remembered what I learned from Tsunade during the war. Well, I forgot is going to pay more than 5 million Ryo. I found out that the reason she's strong isn't simply because of her body, which is indeed extremely strong thanks to her Senja bloodline and training. But the real reason why she could achieve crazy feats like destroying the ribcage of Susanoo with her punch power alone is that she perfected the principle of turning chakra into power. There are two principles that taijutsu users follow. Either you turn your chakra into power, or you turn your chakra into speed. But of course, both of these two involve many factors. To turn chakra into power, you will have to focus your chakra into your fist without releasing it, and then you will have to change the nature of that chakra into yang chakra. And the more chakra you can accumulate and keep control of, the more power your punch will have. And this is why Tsunade, who's extremely proficient in chakra control thanks to her occupation as a medical ninja, can master this principle easily and perfect it. Meanwhile, to turn your chakra into speed, it's all about accumulating it quickly. Turn it into yang chakra before releasing it instantly. And the faster you get at accumulating chakra and releasing it from a certain point of your body, the faster you will get. This is also the principle of the body flicker jutsu, but it will always have the flaw of being predictable as you will only go in a straight line. In addition to that, not everyone has the required reaction speed or dojutsu to allow them to use it effectively in a fight. Back to the casino, I was still sitting on my chair unfazed by Tsunade's outburst, and I watched as she retrieved her hand from the ground and walked toward me. "Kid, what did you come here for?" Oh, she's already regaining her calm. What an amazing woman, I thought before I stood up and said, "I want you to come back with me to the village." Kakashi shot me a surprised look as he thought, "What's this kid plotting?" Tsunade shot me a mocking look as she said, "You think I will come back with you after what you told me? Unless maybe you want me to go on a rampage inside the village." "No, not really. Danzo is dead already. So if you want to go on a rampage, you can do it on the Saratobi compound. That geezer would surely love it, but that's not why I want you back." Tsunade was surprised at how relaxed I was even after her showcase of strength, and found herself curious about why this kid needed her. "What do you want then?" Before I could answer this question, I noticed from a corner of my eyes that Mukai was looking at me with puppy eyes, and I almost puked when I saw it. But I swallowed it back and replied, "There are two reasons I want you back. The first one is that asshole over there needs your help to treat his ill son. As for me," my eyes suddenly turned into 3 Tomo Sharingan to the surprise of everyone as I said, "I need to show you directly." Tsunade, understanding that I wanted to use my Sharingan's power on her to show her what I wanted, wasn't fearful at all of the possibility of me putting her in a Jinjutsu, because the Senju were extremely resistant to such a thing, plus because of their constant wars with the Uchiha in the past. They developed many special techniques to deal with the different powers of the Sharingan, so she looked me directly in the eye without any hesitation, surprising Mukai and Kakashi. And then she found herself surprised when she saw the memories I shared with her, the memories of a man she admired and his wife using my level 65 eye of insight. Impossible was all Tsunade could say. Here's Bakorio's current status. Stat value. Name Bakorio Uchiha. Level 15. Health 8120, plus 94 per minute. Chakra 19424. plus 304 per minute. Stamina 3400 plus 45 per minute. Attributes: STRAGIPHY VIT STASPI 134,125,206,251,340,760. Free attribute points 95, 70 plus 25. Mastery: Close combat fighting level 83. Swordsmanship level 71. Throwing art level 72. Sealing art level 18. Chakra control level 73. Meditation level 49. Fire chakra transformation level 56. Wind chakra transformation level 24. Water chakra transformation level 31. Yin chakra transformation level 46. Yang chakra transformation level 51. Skills: Kekkei Genkai. I have insight level 65. I have hypnotism level 67. Yomi no Kuni level 41. Jikaninki level 34. Susanoo level 31. Spacetime. Summon Quintuple Rashomon level 41. Summon Lesser Demon level 31. Blink level 31. General 8. Ninjutsu Fire 8. Wine 10 Water 9 Lightning 7 Earth 9 In 5 Yang 5. Taijutsu 3. Not used yet. Burning Aura level 26. Shuriken Jutsu 2. Kenjutsu Swift Sword Style level 33. Juinjutsu Dark Touch level 7. Genjutsu // Fuinjutsu // Senjutsu // Abilities save and load. Appraisal Map Tenketsu Release Blessing of the Elements. Bloodlines: Uchiha 50%, Akimichi 30%, Shadow 35%. Talents: Body Great Master, Chakra Master, Cooking / Sealing Advanced, Hunter Medium. The increase in his spirit attribute is from his experience in the war. Quest Close Combat 4. Reach level 75, Close Combat Reward. 3,000 points, Burning Aura. Burning Aura active. A type of aura that burns the user's stamina to increase their physical attributes. STR, PHY, AGI, VIT. Level 1. Grants 5% increase in attributes for 100 stamina / second. Level 2. Grants 5.5% increase in attributes for 100 stamina / second. Level 3. Grants 5.5% increase in attributes for 99 stamina / second. Level 26. Grants 11.5% increase in attributes for 88 stamina / second. Quest Ninja Killer. Kage Kill 1 Kage level ninja. Reward: 4,000 points. Summon Lesser Skeleton. Lesser Skeleton. Allow the user to summon lesser skeletons from corpses around them. The higher the level of the corpse, the stronger the skeleton that could be summoned. Quest Ninja Killer. Elite Kage Kill 1 Elite Tier Kage level ninja. Reward: 15,000 points. Flash active. Flash, a form of short-distance teleportation that allows the user to instantly appear in any location in a certain range around him, depending on the level of the skill. 5M at level 1 and cost 1,000 chakra and 500 stamina. Cooldown 100 seconds. Minus 1 hour later. A carriage housing 2 women and 3 kids were leaving the land of tea and on its way to the land of fire. And to be more specific, it was heading straight to Konoha. The driver of this carriage was Kakashi, who's not only proficient in all kinds of jutsu, but also all kinds of life skills thanks to the various missions he did, because sometimes they would require a certain set of skills, especially when acting as a spy or trying to hide your identity as a ninja. And currently, Kakashi still couldn't believe that the kid he was suspecting all this time actually managed to convince this stubborn Sannin to go back to Konoha, which will bolster its forces even more by having such a great medical ninja there, and a Kaga-level fighter as well. As for why she was with us in the carriage, Tsunade insisted that she wasn't in a rush and wanted to check out the scenery back to Konoha. But the truth was that she wanted to observe these three kids that, for some reason, she felt like they will become the future of Konoha. Especially the blonde-haired Naruto, who was extremely enthusiastic and reminded her of her little brother Nawaki when he was his age. Not to mention that he was the current Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, and the fourth Hokage, which she liked a lot, was probably watching her through his eyes right now, along with his wife, who she was related to through her grandma Mito, and already had a short talk with them before agreeing to go back to Konoha. As for Shursui and Itachi, they were following us on foot and having a private reunion of their own with Mukai. Mukai-san, why did you choose to follow Bakorio? Asked Itachi curiously while leaning on a tree beside his friend Shursui. Mukai didn't answer him right away and first decided to take out a cigarette. And after lighting it up, he said, "The same reason I decided to betray Konoha." Itachi remembered the details of the mission he was given by Danzo and couldn't help but frown before he said, "What about when your son is cured? What will you do at that point?" Mukai inhaled a long smoke and exhaled it before he said, "I don't know, we will see at that point." "You really can't be trusted. I don't understand why Bakorio. Keep you beside him," said Itachi with a frown, and was about to activate his Mangekyo Sharingan and end this threat's life with Shursui's help. But he suddenly received an answer he didn't expect, or maybe he did, but he kept hidden in his heart. "I'm the one who should be scared in this situation with that little monster, not the other way around. I'm sure you feel it too, right?" And then he simply flickered and followed after the carriage, silently leaving Shursui and Itachi deep in thought. Back at Konoha, Kakashi kept insisting on meeting the Hokage to talk about the events that happened during our journey, and the leaders of Konoha were extremely excited by the good news that Tsunade was back, especially after the death of one of their strong ninja, Danzo. However, one person in particular wasn't excited, as Tsunade wreaked havoc at his Sarutobi compound and gave his old bones a good beating to vent her anger as I waited for her in Fugaka's office. "I can't believe you actually managed to convince Lady Tsunade to come back to the village," said Fugaku with clear delight and surprise in his eyes. And it wasn't only him, as Shikaku had the same look on his face, although there was also some wariness when he stared at the man standing behind me and looking at the Hokage's office, curiously pretending like he never saw it. "Well, you put a lot of trust in me and probably suffered quite the strong backlash to the point that this idiot decided to follow us secretly," I said while pointing at Kakashi, who was standing to the side with Itachi and Shursui before I continued. "So, this is the least I can do to repay that trust, but it's not the most I can do as I still have another surprise coming soon, and it's a big one." I couldn't help but smile at the end while thinking about their faces when they see Minato and Kushina back to life. "If it's another good news such as this one, I can't wait to see it," said Fugaku with a slight smile on his face, while thinking about how he was going to get back at all the people who kept criticizing and doubting him these past few days for letting the Jinchuriki leave his village alone. "By the way, how'd you deal with that kid?" I asked, remembering Sora, who was sent here before us. "Oh, that was really great that you could deal with such hidden trouble laying right at our backyard. If that kid grew up and became able to wield the Nine Tails chakra sealed inside him, it would have really caused us a lot of troubles, not to mention with a dangerous mastermind with crazy ideals like Kazuma behind him." Here, Fugaku paused a little and turned to Shikaku before he said, "However, we don't know how to handle him right now, as he could cause danger to the people if he goes out of control." Treat him properly. I really hope that kid doesn't suffer any injustice, and don't worry. I will take care of his issues soon after I deal with some urgent matters along with Tsunade. I said with a serious face, making Itachi feel even more conflicted about what he should think of me when he saw how much I cared about a stranger. And at this point, Shikaku said, "Can you let him live with you for a while?" What's this guy plotting? I thought, but I didn't mind much and said, "Yes, I can." That's great. I will ask someone to escort him to your house later, said Shikaku before he left to take care of this matter. After Shikaka left, and I was left alone with Kakashi, Mukai, and these Uchiha guys, I suddenly said to Fugaku, I have a favor to ask. Fugaku seemed surprised at first, as this is the first time I was asking him a favor, but he directly said, "Go ahead. I will make sure to help you to the best of my abilities." I shot him a grateful look before I dropped a bomb on a room. I want the eyes of that traitor Yashiro as well as one of his followers. Mukai's eyes suddenly lit up in thought and astonishment. This kid really is guts, actually asking the head of the Uchiha clan for such a thing. Is he tired of living? Bakorio, what the hell are you trying to do? Do you plan to become like that abomination, Danzo? Itachi was immediately not in favor of this and directly misunderstood me. So I simply ignored him like I always do and simply waited for Fugaku, who I noticed his eyes suddenly narrowed, and he was looking at me with a serious expression on his face, as this matter concerned his soft spot, the Uchiha clan. However, no matter how much he tried to look through me, he saw no greed in my eyes, and I was still sitting there with the same laid-back attitude. So he said, "What do you need them for?" After all, he too didn't want the powers of his clan to be used the same way Danzo did. It's going to be for something that will benefit the village greatly. Fugaku lowered his head thoughtfully, but suddenly a woman's voice said, "Is it for that matter we talked about?" And when Fugaku raised his head, he was surprised to find that it was the legendary Sannin herself, and she seems to know about this matter. Thanks to Tsunade's help and doing some more convincing of my own, Fugaku finally relented and agreed to give me Yashiro's pair of Sharingans, as well as another pair that belonged to one of his followers. It's unfortunate that there was no Sharingan left in Danzo's possession, otherwise I wouldn't have to go through such troubles. And my guess was that either Orochimaru took them, or they were simply waiting for the Uchiha revolt to happen and start their harvesting festival. Either way, I finally got what I need, and I could start the process of reviving Minato and Kushina. A few days later, it was early in the morning of the summer day, and I almost didn't wake up because of how tired I was thanks to the surprise birthday party Mikoto organized for me, and it lasted the whole night. So, I ended up oversleeping until I started hearing knocking on my door, and felt that the person was quite impatient and was about to smash it soon if I don't open it, so I immediately knew who it was. What brought you here so early in the morning?" I asked Tsunade, who was accompanied by her assistant Shizun, while letting out a long yawn. "Little brat, I already finished reading through the research left behind by Danzo and Orochimaru on how to integrate my grandfather's cells into a person's body to gain his abilities. But just so you know, it's almost impossible to achieve a high level of acceptance because the cells are extremely active, so there will a high level of rejection when they interact with foreign cells. After all, even Orochimaru's body wasn't good enough to handle those cells. As for Danzo, he barely managed to integrate them in his own body, but it was to such a low degree that he only got a boost in his chakra capacity and slight physical enhancement, and none of the crazy regeneration. The tired look on my face vanished like an illusion as I heard her going straight to business. So I said, "I don't need the function of increasing the capacity. I just want you to recover their bodies to the point where they won't immediately die once they possess them. Is this possible?" Tsunade looked at me arrogantly as she said, "Of course it is. If I can't do it, No one can. And Shizen nodded in agreement. But I didn't agree to this sentiment despite knowing how great her skills were. After all, this world was hiding many mysteries. That's great to hear. When will you begin? I asked in anticipation, and I received a satisfactory answer. Right now, did you prepare whatever method you're going to use to completely heal them? I nodded at her. Yes, everything's is ready on my end, and they both learned that jutsu. So they are ready. Tsunade's eyes flickered a little when I said that jutsu, because she understood that I was talking about the spirit transformation jutsu, and it reminded her of her lover Dan. Seeing her teacher still showing such a sad look even after this many years pained Shizen, but she couldn't do anything about it, which made her feel even worse. But Tsunade was quick to regain her calm and said, "That's good to hear. Let's go. I already took out their corpses." I nodded at her. 1 second, I need to wake up that little koala. Hearing this brought a smile to their faces, and I quickly turned around and woke up Naruto from his deep slumber and dragged him with us despite his constant complaints. We were going to do this operation on the Senju compound where Tsunade lived, and it was kept as top secret, so not even Naruto knew that I was going to help his parent recover their bodies today. And the only people who knew are Tsunade, Shizen, me, and the people involved. After reaching the Senju's compound, the first thing that came to my attention was a very huge and traditional house, probably where the previous leader of the clan used to live and where Tsunade currently lives. Once we went inside, we were met with a huge hall, and its walls were decorated with many paintings of the first and second Hokages and other important members of the clan, such as Mito Uzumaki, as well as the bloody history of the clan, and right in the center of this wall stood 2 aged coffins. Inside Naruto's seal space, Minato and Kushina couldn't help but stare with complicated looks at these 2 coffins that reminded them of the miracle that happened that allowed them to fully restore their souls. And in Minato's case, from the hands of the Death Reaper, no less. Meanwhile, the clueless Naruto didn't even understand what a coffin, so he asked curiously while pointing at them, "What are these?" I didn't want him to see the gruesome sight of his parents' decomposed corpses, so I simply said, "Go to sleep, Naruto," before I hit a tenketsu on his forehead, causing him to immediately lose consciousness. But I caught him in my arms and put him gently on the floor. Not long after, Minato and Kushina, who learned how to use the spirit transformation jutsu during the past few days, thanks to the notes I gave them, and them being already in a spiritual form, suddenly left Naruto's seal space and stood in front of him. Seeing them appear, Tsunade and Shizen still felt unbelievable that this was actually happening, but they understood that they can't waste too much time because Minato and Kushina couldn't keep using the spirit transformation jutsu forever. So she simply said, "Shall we begin?" I nodded at her, and she calmly walked to the coffins and opened them one by one, and immediately a very disgusting and foul smell assaulted my extremely strong nose, and it almost made me puke. But I wanted to confirm that even though she has hemophobia, which is the fear of blood, something she developed when she was trying to save her lover Dan during the war from a fatal wound he received, but it was to no avail and blood kept gushing out, and she ended up losing him and becoming scared of blood from that point onward. However, it seems like she doesn't fear corpses, which is good, as we couldn't afford mistakes during this operation. And as we were watching, Shizen handed a tube to Tsunade that contained her grandfather's cells and injected some of it on Minato, starting with him, while using her medical ninjutsu to stimulate those cells to get them to restore the function of the body that had a gaping hole in the middle of its stomach from Kurama, as well as replace some of his missing tissue. It took some time, but following the research we got as well as using her own medical expertise, Hashirama cells started dividing rapidly inside Minato's body and covering the missing parts in a white layer that resembled Zetsu. Amazing, Minato's body actually has a great level of compatibility with my grandfather's cells. But how is that possible? Do you know anything about this, Minato? Tsunade couldn't hold her curiosity and ended up asking Minato directly while keeping an eye on the body. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I don't really know much about it. All I know is that both my parents died during the war when I was a baby, so I never got to meet them. I see. Sorry about that. Apologized Tsunade before she turned her attention to Minato's body that finally stopped recovering. Hashira and Misel did their magic indeed, but damage to the organs was simply too much to recover. Not to mention that Minato's body had been decomposing slowly for 5 years, so recovering it to this state was already a miracle. Bakoryo, in the current state of the body, Minato can at most stay alive for 10 seconds at best, so make sure to act quickly. I nodded at her before I looked at Minato and said, "Let me get ready first." Tsunade was really worthy of her nickname as the best medical ninja, as she was capable of healing Minato's corpse and allowing it to recover enough to achieve the bare minimum for him to stay alive. Of course, this was only possible because she used Hashirama cells, otherwise this endeavor would be impossible unless you have a Rinnegan or use a forbidden jutsu that exchange life for life. Still, even though her achievement was truly great, she still kept stressing out that Minato could only hold on for 10 seconds at best while inside this body from the moment she manipulates his heart to start working to the moment he dies again. And this is where the flaw of the spirit transformation jutsu comes to play. Because a characteristic of this jutsu is that if the user possesses someone and that person's body becomes fatally injured, the user will die along with the body if he doesn't leave it fast enough. So Minato was at a huge risk of truly dying if Bakorio doesn't act fast. To their surprise, Bakorio suddenly took out a scroll and unsealed its content, revealing 2 pairs of eyes. One was a normal pair of eyes, while the other was a pair of blood-red eyes, and each one of them was stored inside a cylinder-shaped container that contained some kind of fluid. Then, he directly threw the pair of normal eyes to Tsunade and said, "Please transplant these to Minato's body." Tsunade didn't mind this at all, but she had a weird question that she kept holding inside her heart the moment she heard him demand the pair of eyes from Fugako. "What about the pair of Sharingans? Are you finally going to tell us what you intend to do with them?" Minato, Kushina, and Shizen were also curious about this, but the answer was simply beyond their wildest imagination. "I'm going to transplant them to myself." Minato felt like a bomb exploding through his head, seeing how far Bakorio was trying to go to help him, so he quickly said, "I refuse. We should try to find another way." Minato didn't want to cause another person so much pain just for his own selfishness, which is why Bakorio didn't mind experiencing the pain of gouging his own eyes for him and didn't tell them what he was intending to do from the start. "I agree with Minato. You really shouldn't do this, Bakoryoken. I'm sure we could find another solution," said Kushina with a worried look on her face. Despite their worries, Bakorio's face was very calm when he replied to them, "Maybe we can, but I don't want to waste so much time searching for one. Plus, most of the ones I know requires human sacrifices to revive people. And I don't think you would like those, do you?" Kushina and Minato didn't know what to say, and Tsunade soon after said, "I agree with Bakorio. As you can see, even my grandpa's cells can only recover so much, so this isn't time for hesitation. Minato struggled a little inside before he let out a long sigh and said, "I won't forget this favor." As for Kushina, her eyes started watering a little. Bakorio simply had a small smile on his face as he nodded at Minato before he turned to Tsunade's assistant Shizen and said, "Shizen, can you please help with this while Tsunade transplant those eyes to the corpses?" Shizen, knowing her teacher's trouble with blood, knew that this responsibility was going to fall on her hands sooner or later, but she didn't expect that the kid would trust someone unknown such as her with this kind of task. Did he know about Lady Tsunade's illness? Shizuns couldn't help but suspect this, and Tsunade had similar thoughts, but she decided not to speak on them for now, as she heard her apprentice ask, "Bakorio-kun, aren't you afraid I might not be good enough?" Shizen really didn't understand how this kid could trust people so easily. If you weren't good enough, you wouldn't be her apprentice. I'm sure Tsunade taught you well. Shizen and Tsunade were surprised by how sure of himself Bakorio seemed about what he was saying, and they couldn't help but feel delighted by it as a student and teacher. Okay, then let's go. Shizen was pumped up for this, seeing someone trust her medical skills like this. And seeing her enthusiasm, Bakorio couldn't help but say, "What are you excited about? Someone is about to gouge his eyes here." Hearing this, Shizen felt very embarrassed and approached him while trying to avoid looking at him. But then Bakorio took out another container and looked at her seriously before he said, "You can place my eyes inside of these containers and be extra careful when you handle them, okay?" Hearing the severe tone he was using, Shizen couldn't help but swallow her saliva when she saw this, as she took the empty containers from him. Then she was also handed the containers that contained the normal Sharingan and found herself standing there like a table. "Did you call me here to hold these?" Shizen was about to protest, but out of nowhere the boy in front of her put his hand on his left eyeball, and then he removed it, leaving a hollow eye socket dripping with blood, appearing like a scene from a nightmare as he let out a grunt of pain. Meanwhile, as Bakorio was enjoying his trip to Painland, on the Uchiha compound, a father and his son were staring at each other silently before Fugaku opened his mouth and said, "Tell me everything that happened and how you awakened your eyes." And Itachi nodded calmly and started telling him how he thought Sasuke was dead, and his rage and despair caused his eyes to awaken. Fugaku gritted his teeth as he said, "Damn that bastard Bakorio. Wait until he lands on my hands." But then Fugaku smiled proudly. "You really are my son. You didn't disappoint me and actually awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan of our clan. I will take you later to the Naka Shrine to show you the history of our clan. Maybe your eyes will read better than mine." Itachi was surprised at first, but he was smart enough to realize as he said, "You mean, Father, you awakened you Mangekyo Sharingan too?" Fugaku's eyes started slowly swirling and turned into his Mangekyo Sharingan before he said, "Yes, during the war, but I kept it hidden because of the situation of the clan. Anyways, I will teach you how to use your eyes. Follow me." And Itachi's secret training started, and the mentorship of his father, something that didn't happen before. Back at the Senju compound, Shizen stood there with her mouth gaping, and not only her, other than Tsunade, who turned away not wanting to see the gruesome sight of blood. Minato and Kushina were equally astounded as they stared at Bakorio's pained face. "Stop standing there like an idiot and open the container for me." Bakorio was capable of barely saying this through his gritted teeth, waking everyone out of their trance as Shizen quickly opened the container and handed it to him. As for Minato, he started gritting his teeth so hard and was so agitated to the point that he almost lost control of the spirit transformation jutsu. And Kushina wasn't doing any better as she covered her mouth with her hands while staring at this scene. But the horror show wasn't over, because once Bakorio was done with storing his left eye safely, he immediately took out his right eye and also stored it in a container before he said to Shizen, "Okay, careful, don't mix them. And now the rest is up to you." Shizen nodded, seriously, even though she knows he couldn't see her, before she stored Bakorio's eyes in a scroll he handed to her and started transplanting Yashiro's eyes to him. Surprisingly, this didn't take long, because she found that even without using her medical ninjutsu to heal the replaced eyes, Bakorio's body seemed full of vitality and instantly started healing when the eyes were transplanted. Bakorio slowly opened his eyes, feeling that his vision wasn't the same as it used to, probably because his eyes were far superior to normal thanks to all the enhancement from the system he's been through. "Are you done, Tsunade?" asked Bakorio about the pair of eyes he gave her, which in fact came from Danzo's lab, and apparently he had plenty of human eyes. What a freak. "Yes, what about you? Are you feeling fine?" asked Tsunade, in concern that whatever I was going to do might end up failing. "Don't worry, everything feels right. replied Bakorio before he turned to Minato, who seemed to be in a struggle with himself, and said, "It's already too late to go back now, Minato. Just go with it and don't worry about it." Minato nodded at me before he transformed into a beam of light and quickly entered his body, and the moment he opened his eyes, he was met with two bloody red eyes and was instantly caught in a trance. Then, to the shock of everyone watching, Bakorio suddenly lifted his hand and started blowing air on it, which turned into a small sword made of wind. That's when Tsunade finally realized that something wasn't right and yelled, "Stop!" But it was too late, and before she could move, Bakorio slashed the sword in a swift movement and decapitated Minato's head. "No!" yelled Tsunade before she suddenly appeared in front of Bakorio and immediately sent a deadly kick at him. She held herself back a little, but that kick was enough to cripple most Shunin. Meanwhile, Bakorio suddenly felt the danger and couldn't help but open his eyes and looked in Tsunade's direction instinctively. That's when she noticed that both of his eyes were white, clearly a sign that he was completely blind. "What's going on?" thought Tsunade as she tried to lower the power behind her kick, even more feeling that this situation had more to it than what was apparent. The scene of Minato getting decapitated was too gruesome for Tsunade, especially since she didn't witness how Danzo used Izanagi. But she wasn't an idiot, and once she saw how blind Bakorio was, she immediately put the pieces together in her mind. But her kick was still devastating for any kid his age. "Please dodge," prayed Tsunade in her heart, and to her surprise, her prayer was answered as the blind boy in front of her suddenly leaned his body to the side and avoided her kick. At this exchange, Kushina and Tsunade both noticed something. Bakorio's hand that was holding the wind sword instinctively moved to slash Tsunade, but he suddenly stopped himself from doing so, making them surprised at the battle instinct he has. Facing each other, Tsunade immediately asked the question that everyone wanted the answer to. "What's going on, kid? You better have an explanation for your actions." Bakorio's calm face didn't change at all, as suddenly a silhouette started appearing out of thin air in front of everyone before it materialized into a handsome man with blonde spiky hair and blue eyes. He was wearing the standard Konoha uniform with two bands on both of his sleeves, a green flak jacket, blue forehead protector, and blue sandals, and over it he was wearing a short-sleeved, long, white haori closed in the front by a thin, orange rope. The haori was decorated by red, flame-like motifs on the edges, and the kanji for fourth Hokage was written vertically on the back. Seeing this familiar man appearing out of nowhere made Tsunade emotional. Am I going crazy? She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Minato shot her a warm smile as he said, "No, you aren't, Lady Tsunade." "Thank you, Bakorio-kun," he said as bowed deeply in gratitude. Bakorio nodded in his direction with a smile as he closed his blind eyes again and asked, "How does your body feel?" Minato started checking the condition of his body for a while before he replied, "Perfect. This is the same body I had when I fought Kurama." "That's good to hear. It seems this somehow worked out." Cough, cough. Bakorio suddenly started coughing with a pale face. This was the side effect of using Izanagi and Izanami at the same time. A huge amount of Bakorio's chakra was consumed in a short amount of time, leaving him feeling drained. Feeling the condition of his body, Bakorio couldn't help but remember when he suddenly got this idea of using these two forbidden jutsu at the same time, and he was inspired after he read the in-depth research Danzo did on Izanagi and coupled it with his knowledge from the anime. According to Itachi, Izanagi is the power to change destiny, while Izanami is the power to decide it. And after trying to reconstruct all the knowledge he could still remember about the anime, Bakorio suddenly remembered a scene that happened after Sasuke's final fight with Itachi. At that time, Sasuke was heavily injured and Obito took him in and healed him. However, at that moment, when Obito approached Sasuke and tried to remove his mask and show his face to Sasuke's left eye suddenly transformed into Itachi's Mangekyo Sharingan, and Amaterasu activated automatically to attack Obito, catching him off guard and forcing him to use his Mangekyo ability to get rid of Amaterasu. So, how did Itachi manage to do such a thing? Well, Bakorio believes that it was a combination of both Izanagi and Izanami. Izanagi is a jutsu similar to his save and load ability, because once activated, it allows the user to create something like a checkpoint that records the current condition of a user's body when the Izanagi was activated. So, if the user was injured when he activated his Izanagi, it won't help him to heal that injury. But then comes Izanami, and its power to decide destiny. Izanami allows the user to create a copy of reality and trap someone into it in the form of a genjutsu that keep looping, and the only way to escape it is if the person trapped find the intention behind why he was sealed, which is tricky. So, Bakorio came to the conclusion that Itachi probably used Izanami to create a new copy of reality, which is for Sasuke to activate Amaterasu through his Mangekyo Sharingan. And then he used Izanagi to overlay that copy over reality itself, ending in that spectacular scene. And now, Bakorio did the same thing as he asked Minato beforehand for his permission to check his memory and see his figure when he was at his strongest, and then used Izanami to make a copy of that figure and used it as the save point for Izanagi. And just like that, Minato was back at full strength. However, it was unfortunate that this ability couldn't be used to make Minato stronger, as it was restricted to copying a moment in time that already existed. Seeing how Bakorio was coughing and seemed to be drained of all his chakra, Minato suddenly rushed to his side and asked, "Is everything okay?" Bakorio nodded at him and said, "Yes, I'm fine. Can you transfer some of your chakra to me?" Minato didn't feel convinced as he said, with a worried look on his face that was shared with the rest of the people watching, "I can. But are you sure you are feeling okay?" "Yes. Don't worry, Minato. It's just a side effect of using too much chakra all at once." Bakorio couldn't help but check out his system, and he noticed that he actually used up a total of 15,000 points of chakra. This was only possible thanks to his increased spirit attributed to all his experience during the war. Minato, seeing that Bakorio was really fine, he started transferring his chakra to him. And Tsunade soon after approached them and asked him directly with her face full of curiosity, something her apprentice shared too, but Bakorio was blind, so he couldn't see it, but he somehow felt it even though he didn't have his eyes, which made him surprised. "Bakorio, how did you achieve such a miracle?" Bakorio, hearing her question, thought about it for a second before he suddenly remembered in his past timeline how she kept refusing to teach him her strength of 100 seal jutsu, and how smugly she kept saying that she would never teach it to him. So he thought wickedly, "Finally, I got something you want so desperately, huh?" But outside, he smiled gently as he said, "Sure, let's make a transaction." Tsunade, seeing this smile, reminded her of those tricky merchants, so she immediately put her guard up and said, "What do you want?" Bakorio pretended to put on a thoughtful look on his face before he said, "Your strength of 100 seal in exchange for arguably the best medical ninjutsu ever. What do you say?" Tsunade was about to refuse, as that jutsu was her legacy, and she only wanted to teach it to those she finds truly worthy. But on the other hand, she desperately wanted to know that weird jutsu. Seeing her stuck in a dilemma, Bakorio simply said, "Well, take your time. My chakra is recovered, so it's time to heal Kushina. Let's go, Shizen." Poor Bakorio was going to have another painful experience with eyes that would make him vow to never go crazy and mistreat his body like that snake, Orochimaru, or Danzo. But the future holds other plans for him. Thanks to the help of Minato in recovering his chakra reserves, Bakorio was ready to transplant a new pair of Sharingans with the help of Shizen to begin Kushina's revival. However, he couldn't help but be surprised how easily Minato was able to transfer his chakra to him without seeming to be feeling that big of strain. Meanwhile, he on the other hand almost fainted after exhausting all of that chakra, so it works to show just how insane Minato's chakra reserves are. How in the hell he has all that chakra reserves? Bakorio's thoughts started swirling, and he couldn't help but start thinking that the Namikaze family might also be direct descendants of the Sage of the Six Paths, or at least one of Minato's parents is. While Shizen transplanted his new pair of eyes, and he experienced another wave of intense pain which he could barely tolerate thanks to what he went through in the war. Bakorio couldn't hold back his curiosity anymore and decided to take a peek at Minato with his appraisal ability. But to his disappointment, he only saw question marks on the panel that appeared, but surprisingly, his rank had another thing attached to it. It said World Boss. Minato is really amazing to actually have such a title surpassing most of the people of this world, and I really need to focus on raising my level after this. Thought Bakorio, while Minato, for some reason, felt a weird sensation washing over his body when Bakorio looked at him this time, and he couldn't help but wonder, am I imagining things? But then he shrugged it off and decided to give Bakorio the benefit of the doubt, and simply think of it as him trying to check his condition now that he could see again. Still, that chakra transfer jutsu is really a thing of beauty. Maybe if I learn it, I could solve my problem with the system's battery. Reaching this point, Bakorio decided that he would make sure to do anything in his power to learn that jutsu from Minato in the near future. After he was done with his thoughts, Bakorio turned to Kushina and signaled to her that he was ready, and she simply nodded at him before she shared a look with the now revived Minato and immediately entered her old corpse that now had a new pair of eyes that Tsunade transplanted. After going through the same experience as Minato, and again seeing the shocking scene of her head going flying before suddenly disappearing and reappearing again as a completely recovered body, it didn't stop Tsunade and Shizen from finding themselves speechless, and the former couldn't help but think, should I really exchange jutsus with him? Meanwhile, Minato was observing Kushina's completely revived body in front of him with an absent-minded look as she checked her body for any problems, and she couldn't help but find herself feeling like she was dreaming. We actually got another chance to be with Naruto, muttered Kushina as she looked at the boy sleeping peacefully to the side, and tears started streaming down from her eyes. Then she noticed Minato carry little Naruto up and approach her with a gentle smile on his face, making her tears flow even harder as she quickly rushed and hugged them both. The scene she dreamt of was finally happening for real, and she couldn't believe it. I won't ever let you and Naruto down again. I promise, said Minato as he hugged his wife, and she found comfort in his words as she understood that they were his first priority this time. Meanwhile, as this touching reunion was happening, Tsunade was looking at it with an envious and somewhat tragic look in her eyes as she thought about her lover Dan and wished to be in their place right now. So she couldn't help but look at the kid that could make all of this happen. As for Shizun, she was shedding rivers of tears at this touching scene. Woo! I'm so glad they are back together. But before she could keep watching the drama, she was suddenly hit on the back of the head. What are you doing? Yelled Shizun at the kid who interrupted her from enjoying this touching scene. But the kid simply opened his eyes, showing her that he was blind, and said, "You still have work to do, so stop slacking off." Shizen, recalling what this kid went through so that the touching scene in front of her could be realized, looked at him with an embarrassed look and couldn't help but regret her earlier outburst. So she nodded like a good girl and went with him to the side to transplant his original eyes back to him. "Okay, let's begin," muttered Bakorio before he in one fell swoop removed both of his eyes. Now in a more practiced manner, and Shizen quickly transplanted his old eyes back to him and started healing him so that he would recover quickly. And before long, Bakorio opened his eyes again and finally found that his perfect vision was back to normal as he observed his surrounding and checked if everything was okay before he turned his attention to Minato and Kushina, who were approaching him with grateful looks on their faces. "Bakorio-kun, I can't express how thankful I'm for this new life you granted us to be with our son," said Minato with a completely touched look on his face. As for Kushina, she simply shot me a pained look when she saw the traces of blood around my eyes and quickly rushed at me and gave me a strong hug as she kept thanking me while tears kept streaming down her eyes. Thank you so much. You can't imagine how much this means for a mother like me that kept looking at her son every day living on his own without having any power to help him and take care of him. Meanwhile, Bakorio, seeing these two act like this, couldn't help but smile warmly at them and thought that his little sacrifice was worth it as he patted Kushina on the head and said, "It's okay now, don't cry. You've got a new chance, so make the best of what you can with it." Kushina nodded as her heart exploded with happiness at what the future held for her and her family. And seeing his wife like that, Minato knelt beside her, and he too started comforting her before he said to Bakorio, "At first, I never thought you would actually find a way to revive us without a huge sacrifice, but we were both ready to help you in any way we could if you kept your promise to take care of Naruto in our place. But right now, things are different." Bakorio raised his head at Minato, and even Shizune and Tsunade couldn't help but listen to this conversation and intrigue. So this kid used Naruto to gain Minato's and Kushina's trust, huh? What's Minato going to do now that he doesn't need this kid? Minato suddenly put on a serious look on his face as he said, "I know I promised Kushina that I won't let her and Naruto down again, but that promise wasn't meant just for them. It also concerned you, Bakorio-kun, and no matter what trouble you find yourself in the future, I will always be there for you, even if it costs my life. And I think Kushina wouldn't mind it, right?" Hearing what Minato said, Kushina shook her head and said, "No, I will also be there for Bakorio no matter what." Hearing what they said, Bakorio suddenly lowered his head, letting his face be covered by his hair as he muttered, "Thank you." Only he knows how touched he was by those words. Seeing the reunion of parents with their children is always moving, and this is the scene Tsunade, Shizen, and Bakorio were currently witnessing unfolding in front of their eyes, as Naruto, who just woke up, couldn't believe that his parents were standing in front of him, and he won't have to be. Restricted to simply seeing them in that damp seal space, but he can actually live with them all together. Meanwhile, as that family was having their happy moment, which they truly deserved, and Shizen was watching them with twinkling eyes, Bakorio noticed that Tsunade appeared to be in a very sad mood, but she kept trying to cover it and put on a smile on her face. But emotions cannot hide from Bakorio's eyes, so he approached her and said, "Let's go talk about our deal." Tsunade, still trying to hide her emotions, simply nodded to Bakorio and turned to Shizune and said, "Wait for us here. We'll be back soon." After she said this, she turned to Bakorio, thinking that he was simply after her jutsu, and gestured for him to follow her coldly as she led him to another room in her house. While Bakorio was following behind her, he couldn't help but admire how great this house was, truly deserving of the Senju clan, and before long they arrived at a room that was filled with old books and had a single desk inside it, which he guessed was the room Tsunade uses to study. Before they even entered this room, Bakorio was immediately assaulted by the scent of old books, which made him feel nostalgic as he recalled his old study, which he called his little heaven. After they entered the study, Tsunade closed the door behind them, and they both sat down facing each other, separated by the desk, and only now did Bakorio speak, and his question brought waves to Tsunade's heart as it was unexpected. "Do you want to talk about it?" Tsunade, not believing that this kid could actually see through her mask, decided to play it dumb and asked, "Talk about what?" Bakorio understood that it wasn't easy for this woman to open up to anybody, especially someone she didn't know much about like him. So he went straight to the point and said to her, "I know you were feeling sad from the moment you witnessed Minato and Kushina using the spirit transformation jutsu. And that feeling simply grew stronger when you saw their successful revival and the happiness they felt for getting a new chance in life." Tsunade suddenly stood and took a step back as she looked at the kid in front of her in astonishment. If it was only him seeing through her emotions, she wouldn't be this surprised. But this kid was doing all of this while occupied with a very important task. And sometimes he was completely blind, yet he actually still spared some time to observe her, which made her understand that he never let his guard for an instant, which terrified her. How did you know all of this?" asked Tsunade while trying to calm herself down as much as possible. "Oh, That was actually thanks to Kushina. Bakorio said this lie as a matter of fact, and even Tsunade couldn't see any falsehood on his face. Kushina asked Tsunade as she regained her calm and sat down again. Yes, Kushina. When I gave them the spirit transformation jutsu, she told me that this used to be the signature jutsu of a man named Dan Kato, and she said that he used to be your lover. So seeing you. Act like that I easily connected the two. Bakorio had a sympathetic look on his face, and for the first time, it wasn't something he was faking because he really pitied this woman that lost everything dear to her in her life. Hearing what Bakorio said and understanding that he knew what he was talking about and wasn't simply bluffing, Tsunade finally allowed for her true emotions to appear as her face became covered with sadness. You are correct, I know I shouldn't be, but I was actually envious of Minato and Kushina when I saw how they came back to life, and I wished I could experience that type of happiness too and see my loved ones come back. Bakorio put on a thoughtful expression before he said out of nowhere, "Can you promise me something?" Tsunade reined in her sad expression before she responded to this kid. What do you want? Are you trying to make me emotional believing that it might help your negotiations for the strength of 1,000 seal jutsu? Tsunade thought this is what the kid was after and felt stupid that she actually opened up a little to him, but she couldn't help but widen her eyes as she saw him shook his head and say with a genuine look, I know you don't have many attachments left to Konoha, and I understand why. That's why I hope you can promise me that if something ever happens to me, please take care of Mikoto and the children in my absence. Of course, now Minato is alive, so this is only when he's also occupied. Tsunade was truly shocked at the weird request this kid suddenly came up with, but she suddenly had an idea and said, Are you willing to exchange this favor for the jutsu you used to revive Minato and Kushina? Bakorio's eyes flashed a little bit before he replied, Their lives can't be compared to any jutsu, but yes, I don't mind going with this exchange. He actually accepted? Is he really willing to give up his desire for my legacy just for the sake of his friend Dash? When Tsunade's thoughts reached this point, she suddenly remembered that this kid had just gone through an unimaginable amount of pain of transplanting several pairs of eyes just for the sake of reviving his friends, and he didn't let a single sound out of his mouth so that he doesn't make them feel guilty about it. It seems I misjudged this kid, thought Tsunade before she let out a sigh and said, Fine, I can promise you I will take care of your friends in case something happens to you. And as you said, people are priceless, so you don't need to exchange that jutsu for them. Just as she finished speaking, Tsunade witnessed a smile of delight appearing on Bakorio's face and was shocked as he muttered, Well, you passed the test, Tsunade. It seems it's worth it to invest some effort into helping you. What are you talking about? Asked Tsunade with a frown, not understanding what was going on, and Bakorio replied with the same smile. I can help you find some closure, but I had to test you first to see if this sacrifice is worth it or not. After all this time, I will to use my own eyes. At the end, Bakorio pointed at his pitch-black eyes, confusing Tsunade even more. Test? You mean you were lying when you said you might disappear? Tsunade was about to get angry at the thought of this little kid toying with her, but she suddenly noticed a sad look on his face that appeared for only an instant before it disappeared again as he said, No, I didn't lie to you. I would really love if you could help me fulfill that request. Was I imagining things? Thought Tsunade as she recalled that sad and lonely look. No, I'm not. She was convinced that she saw right, but she didn't want to bother him with it, as it doesn't seem like something he would talk about. So she asked him about something else he said that intrigued her. You said you want to bring me closure using your eyes? Bakorio nodded at her, and to the shock of Tsunade, his eyes started to slowly change into his Mangekyo Sharingan before he said, Yes, these eyes can help you. Tsunade didn't know how many times she was going to be surprised today before she gets used to it, as every time she thinks that she understood the limitations and capabilities of the boy before her, he retrieved something new to shock her with. And now, staring at his eyes that transformed into the unique pattern of the rare Mangekyo Sharingan, she found herself speechless. But this experienced Sanine soon calmed herself down and asked the boy in front of her, who kept staring at her silently, "Does Fugaku and Minato know that you awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan?" Bakorio expected this question, and he simply shook her head to answer her, and said, "You're the only person I revealed this secret to, and I hope it stays this way." Tsunade really didn't know what to say, especially since in this timeline, Fugaku wasn't forced to reveal his Mangekyo Sharingan, and Shursui also wasn't forced to reveal his, so this was her first time hearing about someone possessing them, and Itachi's awakening was kept as top secret. Why are you worried about suddenly disappearing if you have these eyes? Tsunade was perplexed at what could worry this kid in front of her who appeared to be so talented, but she couldn't say anything when she heard his answer. Madara Uchiha also had these eyes in addition to the 9 tails under his command. Yet her grandfather Hashirama still beat him in the end. So having these eyes means nothing with the lurking powers in this world. Tsunade's eyes suddenly widened, but she ended up agreeing. After all, she suffered plenty of losses in her life, including the one that gained her the title of a Sannin, so she wasn't arrogant at all about her power and knew how to keep her ego in check, and she was glad to hear that such a successful kid was able to do it too. Then she suddenly remembered Bakorio's previous words and couldn't help but ask him in anticipation, "So, what did you mean by saying that your eyes can help me find closure?" Bakorio grew thoughtful a little before he started unleashing a little bit of his aura of death. "These grant me the power to be connected to the realm of the dead." Seeing the ominous aura of death and hearing what he said, Tsunade's heart suddenly started beating rapidly as she said, "You mean?" Bakorio nodded at her and said, "Yes, I can help you connect to your loved ones and talk with them, but that's the limit of my current ability, and you'll have to be quick." Tsunade felt like her heart was about to leap out from her chest, so she held her hand to her chest and said nervously, almost in a begging tone, "Please help me." Tsunade lost everyone dear to her, and she always wished she could see them again. Her grandfather died for some reason not long after his fight with Madara when she was still a little child. Her uncle died soon after him in an ambush from Kyomo. Her grandmother died after the 9 tails was extracted from her, and the rest of her family, including her little brother Nawaki, died in either the second or the third ninja wars until her whole clan was gone, leaving her all alone living a tragic life. A life that only got worse when she lost her lover too. Seeing the state of this legendary character, Bakorio couldn't help but pity her as he said, "Land me your 2 hands, and I want you to think of the people you want to meet as hard as you can." Tsunade quickly held his tiny hands before she closed her eyes and started thinking about the 2 people she regretted losing the most, her lover Dan and her brother Nawaki. Meanwhile, as Tsunade was focusing on her loved ones, Bakorio, on the other hand, was focusing all of his power to find these 2 using Yomi no Kuni, and before long, he located them thanks to the help of Tsunade's overwhelming emotions that acted as a beacon to connect to them through his power. This was something he gained after the level of his Yomi no Kuni raised through its continuous use during the war, and thankfully it wasn't as taxing as using the chains of death. After all, instead of dragging something from that realm, he was simply meeting the dead souls halfway, right now. After confirming that he located the right souls, Bakorio suddenly opened his eyes and said to Tsunade, "Look into my eyes." Tsunade noticed that his left eye was slightly bloodshot, and she understood that it might start bleeding at any moment, but she didn't say anything as she looked at his eyes and found herself in a dark space, and in front of her were 2 people looking around curiously. They were Dan and Nawaki, and she couldn't help but start sobbing uncontrollably as she rushed at them. Meanwhile, on the hall, Minato and Kushina suddenly raised their heads and looked in the direction of the room where Tsunade and Bakorio were having their talk, and they couldn't help but look at each other and worry and think, what a terrible and ominous aura. Is this the doing of Bakoryoken? This was the effect of the aura of death Bakorio summoned and was currently revolving around him and Tsunade as it connected them to a space between life and death. Meanwhile, the oblivious Naruto and Shizune were happily talking to Minato and Kushina, who were acting as if everything was fine. This lasted for 5 minutes, and after that, they were approached by Bakorio and Tsunade, whose eyes appeared to be red for some reason, as if she was crying. Yet Minato, Kushina, and Shizune could feel something different about her smile, which she was using while talking to Bakorio. It seemed much more genuine. Bakorio thought long and hard about if he should expose Minato and Kushina's revival, but in the end he opted for only telling Fugaku and Shikaku about it, and left the 4 of them the choice if they want to tell someone else about it, like Kakashi or Jiraiya, for example. This news shocked those 2 to their bones, and they couldn't believe that Minato was actually standing in front of them until he showed them his flying thunder god, Jutsu, removing any doubts they might have had left, and they ended up staring at the kid who achieved all of this in wonder. But then Fugaku suddenly had a realization and asked Bakorio, "Is this why you requested for the 2 pairs of Sharingan?" Bakorio simply shrugged at him as if saying it was obvious, so Minato decided to explain instead and started recounting all the pain Bakorio had to go through in order to help them recover, which left them speechless. Meanwhile, Shikaku felt slightly embarrassed at doubting Bakorio, while Fugaku couldn't feel happier at seeing his old and reliable friend back. After all, when Fugaku found out that he wasn't going to have a chance to become Hokage, he used all of his power and the Uchiha's power to support Minato to become a Hokage, so their relationship was very good. But Bakorio found himself stuck with another issue. Because Minato and Kushina's identity was supposed to be hidden, they ended up living with Bakorio in the Uchiha compound, and he was anything but happy about it. After all, during the past few days, he even dealt with that side character Sora and absorbed the 9 tails chakra inside of him before he went to Asuma and convinced him to take care of his old friend's kid. But he got rid of 1 and got 2 instead. Well, at least I won't need to worry about taking care of Naruto all the time. And with this optimistic thought, Bakorio started planning the release of Kurama from his seal with the help of Minato and Kushina. A few days after Minato's and Kushina's revival, Tsunade was still staying in Konoha, trying to help Mukai heal his ill son. And after doing some diagnosing, she actually found out that his son's situation was almost helpless, and Bakorio, who is learning medical ninjutsu from her, using one of his shadow clones, couldn't help but ask when he saw her deep frown while looking at the emaciated kid that had some resemblance to Mukai and was clearly in pain. "What's wrong? Did you find out what's wrong with Mukai's son?" Tsunade's frown deepened even more, and Shizune, who was beside her, was surprised to see Tsunade actually lose her cool this much. And after some contemplation, Tsunade finally said, "This kid has a huge number of abnormally active but dysfunctional blood cells that are being produced continuously, which are causing this deterioration all over his body, and I might need some high-quality equipment if we want to kill those cells, but this treatment might endanger this kid. Unfortunately, I don't have any other solution, and I don't think we have plenty of time to come up with one." Mukai's heart was broken when he heard the news that his son didn't have much longer to live, and his treatment is close to impossible without killing him. And to make matters worse, this news was coming from the greatest medical ninja in the world. So he started clenching his hands and gritting his teeth with so much force that he started bleeding from them before he asked Tsunade, "Are you sure there's no other way to heal Murata?" Tsunade could see the love and care this guy had for his son, and it was something very clear as he went so far as to betray the strongest hidden village and put his life in danger just to get enough money to extend the life of his son. So, she ended up looking at the kid who brought some light to her heart as she remembered the jutsu he used to heal Minato, and Kushina trying to see if he could use the same way to save Murata, and the perceptive Mukai immediately picked up on this and turned to Bakorio quickly and begged him, "Please, if you have any way to treat my son, please help him." Bakorio fell deep in thought when he heard Tsunade's diagnosis, and he couldn't help but think about an illness from his old world that had similar effects, leukemia. And this kid probably didn't even have an image of himself when he's healthy, so it was impossible to treat him with a combination of Izanagi and Izanami, like he did to Minato and Kushina. So, Bakorio ended up shaking his head, putting Mukai under more despair. "Sorry, Mukai, but the forbidden jutsu I can use requires the user to at least remember a point in their lives when they were healthy, so it won't work on your son," said Bakorio, and Mukai couldn't help but fall on his knees beside his son's bed and hold his emaciated hand, feeling heartbroken, especially when his son looked at him with cloudy eyes oblivious to what was going on around him, as he was only 3 years old. But something he understood was that he was in so much pain and would moan from time to time because of it. Shizun's eyes started tearing up, and even Tsunade didn't want to stay anymore and was ready to leave, but Bakorio's following words stopped her in her tracks. "But maybe there's a way to save him." Mukai suddenly raised his head, his eyes igniting with hope again, as he quickly said, "Please tell me how, and I will do anything." Tsunade and Shizun were also intrigued and couldn't wait to hear Bakorio's thoughts, although they weren't that hopeful about them, since he only started learning medical ninjutsu not long ago. However, what they didn't know is that Bakorio knew a lot about this, more than needed, because one of his grandsons in his old world had the misfortune to be affected by this disease. However, his old world was far more technologically advanced, and there was a treatment for it. Remembering his little grandson, Bakorio couldn't help but turn a little nostalgic before he dragged himself back to reality and started explaining his reasoning. "Tsunade, you said that Murata's body is producing a large number of dysfunctional blood cells, and they're damaging his body. And you think you need all that equipment to kill these cells, but I think you can use another way to achieve a similar effect, and you will have better control over it." "Really? There's a less dangerous way." Mukai's heart was almost leaping out of his chest as he said this. Meanwhile, Tsunade was surprised at first hearing that she actually can use another way, but then she suddenly understood what Bakorio was implying, and she couldn't help but frown as she responded to him. "I don't know how you know about the effect of my creation rebirth jutsu, but I indeed could forcefully cause those cells to divide until they die, but that won't stop this kid's body from producing more of them." Mukai started to feel his hopes getting crushed again, but Bakorio's next words stopped it from happening. "You are right, but at least next time you can use your seal to stop those cells from dividing and growing bigger. So no matter what, his normal cells will always stay dominant, and the small number of dysfunctional cells won't affect the normal functions of his body like they're doing right now. And who knows? Maybe in the future, we will find a proper cure for it." Tsunade's eyes suddenly lit up, and Shizun understood what this look meant and wanted to confirm, "Lady Tsunade, is it really possible to save this poor kid?" Mukai looked hopefully, waiting for a positive answer. Tsunade looked thoughtfully at Bakorio, who was looking at Murata with a nostalgic look. Why does he know so much about his illness? Before she nodded her head and said, "I think it's doable." And Mukai couldn't help but shoot Bakorio a grateful look as he felt a huge weight was lifted from his heart. Then Tsunade started approaching Murata, while black marks started spreading from the diamond-shaped seal on her forehead until they covered her whole face. At this point, she turned to Mukai and said, "Use your Byakugan and help me pinpoint the areas that contain the most dysfunctional blood cells." Mukai didn't hesitate at all as he nodded and activated his Byakugan and started directing Tsunade, and to her surprise, Mukai was extremely precise, showcasing his extreme knowledge of the human body and his great mastery of his Byakugan. Meanwhile, as this was going on, far away from Konoha in an isolated forest, there were 3 adults and 2 kids. They were, of course, Fugaku, Minato, and Kushina. As for the kids, they were the real body of Bakorio, as well as Naruto. "Why did you bring me here?" asked Fugaku, not understanding what was going on, and Minato quickly dropped a bomb on him with a smile. "We're going to unseal Kurama from Naruto." Fugaku's stoic face suddenly broke into a shocked expression as he said, "Kurama? Do you mean the Nine Tails? Minato, have you gone crazy?" Fugaku expected many things when he was brought here, including that it might be a trap, but he never expected that they were actually going to unseal such a dangerous beast. "Don't worry, Fugaku. Kurama isn't as you expect. Just watch the show," said Bakorio before he nodded at Minato to start the unsealing process along with Kushina, and before long, a very huge fox appeared in front of them. It was young Kurama, and Fugaku couldn't help but look at him warily and was ready to activate his Mangekyo Sharingan and control him at any moment. "Ha, I'm finally free," yelled Kurama, causing a huge shockwave in the area. "Hey, stupid fox, this isn't over yet, so calm down," yelled Bakorio as Fugaku watched how Minato and Kushina started inscribing the Sun Seal and the 7-star seal on Kurama one after another, and was shocked to hear what their effects were.
That's it for today. Remember to show your support to the creator of this story if you enjoyed it. If you would like more parts of the story to be uploaded, leave a comment and subscribe to get notified when the story continues. Bye-bye for now, and I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day.